What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to a very special edition of Matt Goes to the Movies. I am joined by Rob and Harrison of the Basement Binge. So, first, before we get into everything and why it's a special edition, Rob, welcome.
Holy cow! It is awesome to be able to do this show. This is something that I've definitely been looking forward to, and honestly, I've really been looking forward to hearing the show since you started the podcast, Matt. You know, the whole thing was based around just Star Wars, and you'd always talked about doing a 10th show. What is this, episode 50 now, 60 of Matt Goes to the Movies, and kind of recapping all of them together. And I'm super excited. And first of all, congratulations on 1 year of the show.
Yeah, thanks. We'll get into that a little bit more, but also from the Basement Binge, Harrison, you've heard him before on this show. So, Harrison, welcome back as well.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am extremely excited to be talking about Star Wars, especially with the two of you. Like Rob said, I remember when your podcast first started. I had no idea who you were, but I was like, oh, hey, it's somebody talking about Star Wars, and it's a new podcast. I was a new podcast. I was like, I'll support him, and then it just quickly became a show that I loved to listen to. And then I was on the show, and so it's like full circle to now be on the show talking about Star Wars with two people who I've developed a great friendship with. I've been looking forward to this episode for quite a while. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Like Rob said, this is a 1 year anniversary episode of the show. This was originally meant to be recorded a long time ago, and it was originally just going to be me, but things happened. More episodes came out. I did some, side episodes with Harrison, and here we are. But it certainly, for me, worked out for the best because I certainly want to talk about Star Wars, but on a little bit grander scale. So I'm super excited to have this be a, co-op, so to speak, episode here with you guys. And for all the listeners, there's been a lot of interaction about this on the Facebook page. We're going to get to some of that throughout this episode as well. But this will be part one. This is going to be a two-parter because there's a lot to talk about. They'll both be released by tomorrow, so that's going to be exciting. That will be the 12th of May. But part one, we're going to focus on the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy and focus on the Disney movies for part two. So I'm really excited to get started with this, but what we want to do here is everything we talk about is going to be spoilers. So for some reason, if you haven't seen any of the prequel or the original trilogy, from here on out, you're going to have to pause it and watch these movies to come back. But Rob, I'll let you start. Tell us a little bit about your history with Star Wars, because this is a series that means a lot of things to a lot of people. Some really good, some bad. We love to say there's nobody hates Star Wars as much as a Star Wars fan. But what has Star Wars meant to you over the years?
It's sadly, Matt, you're 100% correct that very few people hate Star Wars like the people who love Star Wars. And certainly we see that in some of the discussion of what's been released lately. But in terms of just what does this mean? Star Wars is the single biggest intellectual property in the world. This is, without a doubt, the most important piece of popular culture we have. It encompasses films, TV shows, video games, toys, clothing, comics, and graphic novels. If there is a way to incorporate something with intellectual property, it has been done with Star Wars. And almost to the point where some people might say overload, and yet we, the fans, can't get enough. If there's a rumor, people comb through every single detail of the trailer or anything they can find, or casting rumors, anything, trying to get more information if it's Star Wars. What's really interesting is if you look back to 1977, when the first Star Wars film, A New Hope, comes out, sci-fi was not really the genre that it is today. There certainly were films out there, but pre 1977, you certainly have things like 2001: A Space Odyssey. You have The Day the Earth Stood Still, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and then you have some of those black and white horror films. As far as sci-fi, but you don't have space operas like this. You don't have hyperdrives and blasters and things of that nature. You really don't get that until Star Wars hits the scene, much in the same way that I think Tolkien is regarded as the father of fantasy for his work with Lord of the Rings. George Lucas is the father of modern science fiction. And I think so much of what we see in culture, you can absolutely draw it back to his inspirations, directly from Star Wars. It's really amazing when you think about it, the millions of people worldwide who have either formed or strengthened friendships or possibly even marriages over their love of Star Wars. I mean, you just think about this show. Matt, you and I have been friends for a couple of years, but, Harrison, if people have been listening to this show, they might think that we've known each other for a long time. We've never met face to face. In fact, we've never even had a phone conversation. And yet we can bond and become friends over the internet about talking about Star Wars. And it's amazing. There's not a lot of other things in this world that you can really point to that has that power, that has the ability to just bring people together. If you're in a new group of people that you've never met before, just start asking if anybody likes Star Wars, and you're going to find people to become friends with. It's an amazing world. It's an amazing contribution to human culture.
Yeah, that's so well put. Harrison, you and I have had some talks about Star Wars, specifically some of the prequel trilogy, one episode in particular. Give us a little bit of rundown of your history with Star Wars.
Yeah, man, how do you follow up what Rob said? But history with Star Wars, I think that listeners of the show know that I like Star Wars. I think one of the first episodes not the first episode I did with you, but where we started to do it consistently was with The Mandalorian season 2. And from listening to that and recording that with you, it's very apparent that all three of us love Star Wars. But what isn't, I assume is clear, I know that the three of us know, is that I'm much younger than the two of you. I'm only 23 years old. So like when I think of Star Wars, primarily I think of the prequels, which is probably a lot different from you. I don't know. I'm just kind of making assumptions. But Star Wars was everything. In fact, still right behind me, there's a toy lightsaber, Obi-Wan lightsaber that I had since I was like 10. It's the same one. For my anniversary, my wife got me a Baby Yoda. So Star Wars means everything. Growing up, I had tons and tons and tons of Star Wars toys. That's what I always had the most of. My brother and I played through Lego Star Wars, the original trilogy, probably like 10 times completely. We had the entire Revenge of the Sith movie memorized. In fact, the action fight scene between Obi-Wan and Anakin, my brother and I had memorized from the lines to the choreography, and we would reenact it in our backyard because I had Obi-Wan's lightsaber and he had Anakin's. Like Star Wars is a huge reason that I love movies. It's a huge reason that I do a podcast. It's how I met you guys. Like Star Wars, when you talk about movies, for me, the center of that has always been Star Wars. And so I'm really excited to be talking about it because it means so much to all of us for good reason. There's a reason we keep watching Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, Harrison, I think you bring up a good point, and I won't speak for Rob. I can let him speak to that point as well. But yeah, the Star Wars for you and for a lot of people that interacted with this particular episode so far through the Facebook page, a lot of people identified Star Wars as the prequel trilogy, where Rob and myself, the first glimpse of Star Wars we had is the original trilogy. There's an interesting dynamic to see a lot of the interaction be. Several people have said Revenge of the Sith is number one, hands down. I even had one person talk to me about how they actually like really, really like Attack of the Clones, and far be it for me to say anything about what Star Wars movies people like, because that's one of the great things. You can have 100 different opinions about it. And I find them all fascinating. But yeah, Star Wars is, if there's one series, as much as I love, and like I know you guys do too, the MCU, and like, you know, Batman and just all these other characters and all these other movies, nothing hits like Star Wars for me. Like this series, this just phenomenon that is Star Wars is always going to be number one for me. And in preparing for this, I rewatched some movies that I hadn't seen in a while, and I still get emotions based on these movies, no matter how many times I see them, no matter how many times I know the same thing is going to happen. It just draws a certain emotion out of me as a person. And it was really one of my first real like loves for cinema, was getting to be involved with Star Wars. So I'm excited to talk about this. Rob, anything based on, you know, Harrison talking about his initial introduction to Star Wars is the prequels, and I think there's a lot of that.
Yeah, Matt, you and I have been talking about this for a while. One of the most popular episodes of your show since the beginning has been Revenge of the Sith, which we're curious about, and the longer we've thought about it, and certainly the more we've interacted with fans of the show, or people who are just starting to become aware of the show, it really occurred to me exactly what Harrison said, that a lot of people are going to identify with their Star Wars based on their generation, based on what came out. So yeah, growing up, being born in the early 80s, to me, Star Wars was the original trilogy. That's all there was. The prequel trilogy came out, and certainly we've got thoughts on that. But, people who grew up when that was out, that was everywhere. Those were the toys you played with. Those were the video games you wanted. That was the clothing that you bought, was with Darth Maul on it. It wasn't necessarily Darth Vader. It was Darth Maul. Those were the characters you identified with. And, my kids who are about, my oldest is about to turn 11, my twins are 8, I expect they will probably much more identify with The Mandalorian and the sequel trilogy maybe than any of them. Although they kind of tend to get into what daddy's into, especially my son. I think maybe they'll probably prefer the original trilogy more, but we definitely see, each generation has its own my Star Wars, and look, we're certainly going to get a chance to talk about what we like and what we dislike. And Matt, you referenced that there was a fan who'd said that he really likes Attack of the Clones, and look, I don't think any of us are going to have that ranked anywhere but dead last when we eventually get to our rankings. But that's okay, but there were different people who had said, well, here's my rankings, and Matt, you'd asked a question like, hey, what did you like about this one, or what didn't work for you about this one? And people almost get a little defensive without realizing, like, nah, man, I'm not going to attack you about it. Like, that's sadly, Star Wars fandom has turned a little bit toxic at times. By the way, we are not those fans. Like whatever you want to like for whatever reasons you want to like it. Certainly, like, have at it. If it's something that brings you joy, like even for me, not liking Last Jedi, I rewatched a couple of films recently to prepare for this, and one of them was The Last Jedi. For anybody who listens to this show frequently, that occasionally that film makes its way into conversation, regardless of what it is we're actually talking about.
Right.
Occasionally, like once per episode. So I rewatched it, and even a film that I don't care for, when that title crawl comes on, it's chills every time. You hear that great John Williams music and you get that title crawl. If you don't get chills, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, there's just so many incredibly iconic aspects of Star Wars. The music, of course, it's a no-brainer. And the individual themes, you can, even in something like Last Jedi, there's little callback themes of Leia's theme, of Luke's theme, of the Luke and the Leia and Han theme. Like when they use a piece of the Vader theme, it's so iconic and powerful. The sound effects, I mean, you know what a blaster sounds like. You know what a TIE fighter screaming through the sky sounds like. It doesn't sound like anything else. The production design, the lore, the villains. Holy cow, Star Wars has some of the best villains that have ever been created in any kind of fiction ever. The vehicles, I mean, they're all utterly impractical. Let's just get that out there. Like the Millennium Falcon is not a good design of a vehicle in any stretch of the way. An X-Wing does not make any sense. A TIE fighter does not make any sense from a practical standpoint for aerial combat. But goddamn, is it cool looking? Like, who cares? Like, it doesn't matter. You know, all the alien critters. There's so many aspects of this that you can point to and say that is iconically Star Wars and nothing else. You know, this only exists in this realm. There are no sound effects that you can think of from any movie that are anywhere near the sound of a lightsaber igniting. Like that has that level of, you know, just impact. As soon as you hear it, you recognize it, you know what it is. I can't think of anything else. Maybe the T-Rex scream from Jurassic Park is close, but it's still not Star Wars.
Yeah, no, I think with Star Wars, if you see it, it's distinctive that it's Star Wars. And Harrison, you know, we're going to start getting into episodes and talking about them, what we like, what we dislike about them. I think it's only appropriate since the prequels started you on Star Wars that we let you talk about the Phantom Menace first. Interestingly enough, all 3 episodes of the prequel trilogy are in the top 10 for downloads for this show, with the Phantom Menace being number 10 on the list, which means Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith rank higher, significantly higher. I'll reveal those in a little bit, but this seems to be an episode that a lot of people wanted to listen to. We got feedback on. So Harrison, talk to us a little bit about your experience with the Phantom Menace, because I know mine. It had been a long time since Star Wars had come out, and I remember the theater being packed. This was obviously way, way, way before COVID. Lifetimes ago, it seems like, that this movie first came out. And I remember what it was like for me to go to this, but I'm wondering for someone who was introduced to Star Wars because of the prequels, what it was like the first time seeing this.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Whenever someone brings up Star Wars in this way, I always try and like scour my brain for the first time I experienced Star Wars, like any way, you know, prequel trilogy, original trilogy, just like when was the first Star Wars experience? And I genuinely can't find it, because I was like 3 years old when the Phantom Menace came out, right? Obviously, I wasn't in the theater. It was on DVD that I watched Star Wars for the first time, obviously. And my dad, especially when I was that age, we watched a lot of movies with my dad, my younger brother, and I. And one of the ones we watched most frequently was Indiana Jones or Star Wars. And I didn't like Star Wars, or I didn't like the original trilogy of Star Wars or Indiana Jones because they looked old. I always wanted to watch the prequels. Like, that's how young I was. That like the pod race scene was cool. The original trilogy looks old. Like that's all I remember. Is the most distinct thing is the pod race scene, and like young Anakin and thinking it was the coolest thing ever. And then we take a trip to St. George, or at this arcade, St. George, Utah, if anyone knows what it is. There was this arcade that they had a pod race arcade game, and I always wanted to play it, and I never could because I was a kid and I didn't have any money. But so trying to find like what my experience with Star Wars was, I don't remember. What I remember is, since I can remember something, I have loved Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan finding Darth Maul, and the pod race scene has been like the coolest thing ever. Granted, as I got older and just watched Star Wars so many more times, I understand that it's so much beyond that. I understood that this little kid driving a pod racer would soon become Darth Vader, and what that actually meant. But it was always just something that was like, hey, you know, my friend said, do you want to go out back and swing our plastic lightsabers at each other and pretend that we're, you know, Obi-Wan and Darth Maul? Like that was Star Wars to me. It's just like, it is just a part of me. I don't know where it started. I just know that it did, and that it never ended throughout my entire childhood, from toys to backyard sword or lightsaber fights to watching with my dad, you know, So I think I'm going to assume that my first memory of Star Wars is the pod racing scene, because that one like is just so distinct to me. But yeah, like obviously I just instantly fell in love with it and thought it was the coolest thing ever. Who doesn't? You know, you got this dude with red beams coming out the side of his handle, and he's swinging around and this intense music, and he's kicking people and flipping. Like, how is that not sweet? You know, so yeah, Phantom Menace is great.
Yeah, see, again, like that's just, it's so interesting because being of the age bracket that saw the original trilogy first, and then anticipating this coming to theaters, my experience is much different because I remember being in the theater. I remember seeing people dressed up. I remember just the anticipation and the opening crawl and Star Wars hits. And I have to tell you, you know, back before it was cool to cheer for everybody showing up in the portal scene for Endgame, that was the coolest theater experience I ever had, was Star Wars. That music hits, oh my God, people are screaming and yelling and high-fiving, and that theater was in chaos mode. It was just unbelievable. But I'll never forget at the end of that, and certainly as time has gone by, I think the prequels, particularly 1 and 3, I still feel 2 for the majority is not fondly remembered by most. But I remember at the end of that movie walking out of the theater, and I'll never forget one guy just talking to a buddy of his and said, "I can't believe I waited for that crap." And you know, when the movie first came out back then, it made a ton of money. But it was just like, what had happened? And if you read anything or hop on YouTube, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff where, you know, people told George Lucas, like, this doesn't work. You cannot, like, they flat out told him, fans will turn against this if you cast a young Anakin. They don't want to see this. Credit to him. He wanted to tell the story that he wanted to tell. That's, you know, his right. But it's, you know, it's interesting, Harrison, to hear your thoughts and your side of it, you know, based on the fact that I know what I experienced when I went there. And I certainly don't like the Phantom Menace. I certainly don't have the disdain for it I once did when it first came out, but being in the theater and being around fans who, again, sometimes are very toxic, it was certainly different to experience it in theaters and have the anticipation of that. You know, Rob, I mean, Return of the Jedi, what was it in between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace? The exact number is escaping me, but you know, it's like a decade since we had Star Wars in the theater.
Even more than that. So Return of the Jedi, the U.S. release date was May 25th, 1983. Phantom Menace is May 19th, 1999. I mean,
yeah,
we've
holy
got,
cow.
I mean, that's an entire generation of kids that went through school without really having new Star Wars in front of them almost. And when you think about how massive this thing is, it's really a surprise that it took Lucas that long to decide to go ahead and do this, right?
Yeah, it certainly is. It's often interesting to me, like, why did it take so long for him to tell this story? But you know, Harrison, again, you mentioned Darth Maul, and this is certainly a character who has stood pretty much the test here of being an interesting Star Wars character, so much that he's made appearances in a movie. He's been a central focus of the Clone Wars TV show and Rebels. You know, Lucas did with this series make a really iconic villain right up there in a lot of ways with Vader, where people wanted to see more of Darth Maul. And he had, again, very little screen time in the Phantom Menace. He doesn't have a lot. He shows up. He's a hologram. He's walking, and he has a quick fight with Qui-Gon Jinn. And then he has the amazing fight with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan with Duel of the Fates, which is right up there with any score that I can think of. But it's amazing what Darth Maul has become in Star Wars. And one of my biggest, not regrets, but one of my biggest disappointments with the Phantom Menace is, I'm not going to say Jar Jar Binks. I'm over that train, but I'm off of that. But is we did not get any more Qui-Gon. I love Liam Neeson to begin with. I can't get enough of him and anything he does. Sign me up for Taken 4 for whatever reason or whatever else he's going to do to beat somebody up in his spare time. But man, he was, to me, he was awesome. Even more so than, Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan. He certainly grew into that role, but I was so disappointed we never got more Qui-Gon. Harrison, because of your relationship to the prequels, character-wise, where does like characters in the Phantom Menace in these prequel trilogies, where they stand for you in terms of like overall Star Wars and like how iconic they are?
I will say my favorite Star Wars character of all time, hands down, is Obi-Wan Kenobi. And when I say that, I'm thinking of Ewan McGregor. Granted, there's so many incarnations of him that's great, but that's what I think of. My brother would probably say the same thing about Hayden Christensen's Anakin Skywalker. Like the prequel characters is what, like when I start thinking about Star Wars, I start thinking about them because like I said, this is what I grew up with. So like I remember when my friend bought a lightsaber that was double-sided, like a toy lightsaber that we, like I said, we play in a backyard, and it was Darth Maul's, and we were all jealous. Like he was the next coolest kid ever because he had so like I mean, I feel like with what you said, this is a bit of an exaggeration, but I feel like Darth Maul for me is what Vader would be like for you. Like if you look at Vader in A New Hope or the original Star Wars, whatever you call it, he's not the best villain. Like he's cool, but like his outfit is super goofy. Like why does he breathe all weird? Why is his voice like that? Like it's kind of campy a little bit. Like Vader is not that menacing. He's not the Vader we know he is in A New Hope. Everything that comes after that is great, right? Darth Maul was cool because he had a double lightsaber and a sweet theme song. It's not his theme song, but that was why he was cool. And his head had spikes on it. Like he was cool, Everything that came after him in the Clone Wars and Rebels and video games, it is what made him an even better character. And I love it because in a way it feels like my Vader. Like, okay, here's this guy that just kind of showed up and he was awesome on screen. He just got a great screen presence, and then we saw the character develop, and it makes everything better. So yeah, I love Maul. And then as far as Qui-Gon goes, I think he's like, if Qui-Gon would have lived, we wouldn't have the original trilogy because he would have trained Anakin properly to be a Jedi. So like, Qui-Gon was OP, and to be played by Liam Neeson makes it even better. I mean, he was great. He had to go, or else we wouldn't have the original trilogy. But I love Qui-Gon. I think he's like the greatest character ever. Again, same thing. I remember one of my friends, her name was Jessica. She had Qui-Gon's lightsaber, which was like impossible to find. And I always I'd be like, let's go play Star Wars. And then I'd be like, I'll be Qui-Gon. because I had that was the only place I could find Qui-Gon's lightsaber was at her house. So yeah, I love Qui-Gon. I never understood why. I just thought he was a cool dude who had a green lightsaber. He was Obi-Wan's master, and that made him cool. And then as I got older, I was like, wow, this guy's a genius. Like he's too good for the rest of the Jedi.
Rob, I think Harrison made a fantastic point about people who grew up with the prequel trilogy. Like their Darth Maul is our Darth Vader because, back then when this came out, and the original Star Wars is before I was born, but I know I have talked to people that were there and saw this. Like back then, that was intimidating because you didn't see anything like that. Like, who is this guy? Like, whoa. But I think he makes an excellent point in the comparison.
Oh, sure. And it makes me sad because, of the things that I like of this film, one of the things I absolutely hate is how badly the death of Darth Maul is handled. Obi-Wan just kind of does this little flippy do right over top of him and cuts him in half, and he just watches him do it. I've always hated that part of this film because Darth Maul as a villain is everything you're looking for in a Star Wars villain. I mean, he looks the part, he sounds the part. He's got before every Jedi had to have some kind of different looking lightsaber besides just the standard kind of hand and a half broadsword adapted look. Before everybody had to have something different, he had the double bladed one. Like, we had not seen that before. And when that trailer came out for the first time and you saw it kick out one side and then kick out the other side after he hits this cool Wing Chun pose, like we hadn't seen that. Like, that just really got people amped. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna co-sign on the love for Qui-Gon. I think he's a great character, but what's disappointing is that we just lost him too soon. And yeah, absolutely, Darth Maul's fantastic, and it just makes me disappointed that the generation of people who grew up with the prequels being their Star Wars, like their Darth Vader, who is a very cool villain in his own right, in terms of the presence we get of him in the prequel films, it gets killed off in a terrible way. But I also I underratedly love 3PO and R2. I can't get enough of those characters. They're so great together, and R2 never actually speaks English, and somehow I absolutely adore that character. And Matt, you mentioned Duel of the Fates. That's as good as scoring a film gets. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's anything out there that hits like Duel of the Fates does in the way that it's used. Maybe there's something. I've got nothing. I've got nothing that's better. But in terms of why this film tends to rank towards the bottom of a lot of people's rankings, and why maybe this film isn't really remembered well, there's some things that you kind of go, oh man, I really wish George Lucas listened to people around him with a red pen that could have just been like, hey man, let's maybe not do that. Like, do you really want to do the Immaculate Conception? Like, come on, George, like that's kind of dumb. Like, maybe let's not do that. And I know that it was explained better in the comics. You shouldn't have to go to expanded media to have something make sense. And I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of that in Star Wars, where you have to go to graphic novels, you have to go to other books to have something kind of spelled out and retcon something that doesn't make a lot of sense. But I wasn't a huge fan of that. I already mentioned, like I said, Darth Maul's death is just terrible. Matt, you called it, Anakin as a kid. It's kind of weird. And then all of a sudden he just ages before our eyes by the next film. Like, that just always has felt weird to me. I think everybody's favorite punching bag from the prequels is Jar Jar Binks. And is he an annoying character? Yes. Is the hate on Jar Jar maybe a bit overdone? Probably. Was he really intended to be a racist caricature? Probably not. Is he still annoying? Yes. All the Trade Federation stuff we get, I think we get a little bit more in episode 2 than we get in this one. But to me, I go, come on, let's just get back to lightsabers and blasters and stuff like that. I don't really care about a lot of this. And I think the pod racing scene is sometimes divisive between fans. I think there are some people who are really into it and love the action of it. And I think there's other people that look at it as this was clearly just put here to try to sell video games. I guess I'm maybe somewhere in the middle of that. I think maybe it was a bit excessive, maybe went on a bit long. And it didn't really make a lot of sense that Qui-Gon was going to bet their whole future on Anakin winning that. But of course, I guess the Force let him know that was going to be okay, and he had faith in the Force. But this is not as bad of a movie, I think, as sometimes it gets portrayed to be.
No, I don't think it is. I think over time, like I said, notwithstanding the fact that it's still not one of my favorites, it definitely is not as bad as when I first watched it. And even, I think I went and saw this twice in the theater. I still didn't like it the second time. And then when it came out on home video, I watched it. There's certainly some really cool parts. The pod racing, I think, is a little ridiculous. It's cool to see, but for me, he starts good Lord, almost like an entire lap down and somehow wins this thing. And it's like, how fast is that damn pod racer like to catch up to everybody else? But, Rob, in regards to Darth Maul and, Harrison, I'm sure you know this, the high ground always wins. So I don't know why you have a problem with Darth Maul's death, because obviously it's been explained,
Well, but Darth Maul had the high ground though. He was standing over top of him.
You sound insane right now. Like, but yeah, I mean, certainly though, and Rob, I'm going to say this, and Harrison, if I'm wrong, stop me here, but you have to watch Clone Wars, Rob. You have to find a way to get through it. Yes. The show is, oh my God, amazing. Get through season 1. It's a little bit rough, but some of the best Star Wars ever. And I think some of the reason why I have a problem with some of these things going back is, and again, Harrison, since you've seen it, the Clone Wars to me is what Obi-Wan and Anakin's relationship should have been in the movies. And I realize that they had more time, but it's not enough for us. And Rob, like, you and I know that they had a falling out because of the original trilogy. I always wondered for, people like Harrison that, started with the prequel trilogy. To me, there would always have been a disconnect as to why these two just fell apart like so easily in my eyes, because everything that we hear about them, one of my problems with all 3 movies of the prequels, everything is done off screen. All of their adventures are mostly talked about in a brief scene. We don't really see them together a ton to really get that bond. You hear dialogue about it, but everything, like, to me, counters that after we get away from the Phantom Menace. Obi-Wan talks about how he's never let him down, and Anakin talks about how, he's the closest thing he has to a father. But at every single turn, all we see is, I don't know, these two just kind of somewhat being at odds, but never really together. Like in episode 2, Anakin's off doing his creeper I have a van vibe with Padme. And, to me, that's the problem. But we can get into episode 2 in a minute here, because one of the other problems that I don't have it with the Phantom Menace. It's what they did later. This introduced us to Padme, who in this movie is an absolute, before there was, we have to stop portraying women in movies a certain way. This is a strong female character who does things on her own. Even back then was really refreshing. And I remember, Rob, do you remember the craze for that middle like lipstick part when this movie first came out? Like,
oh yeah,
that was insane. Like, oh my God. People were like losing their minds over it, but it introduced this strong-willed character. And I said it in my first reviews of these movies, they dump all over, in my eyes, all over her character. And it's one of the most disappointing things of this trilogy to me is the handling of Padme and how she turns into a just I'm in love mess of a person. And I thought it was just horrible what they did to her in this series. Rob, go ahead, talk about Padme a little bit. Specifically like this movie, because I thought she was, again, a bright spot. And if you've seen anything else, like Natalie Portman can act.
100%. Yes. And that's one of the perplexing things about, if we're talking about the prequel trilogy as a whole, you have the roadmap for this. George Lucas, who made the original trilogy, has the roadmap for great female characters with what we got with Princess Leia. Like an iconic, strong female who has feminine aspects of her personality, absolutely, and is still, just an absolute badass. In a movie surrounded by tough people and strong people, Leia 100% holds her own, and is just a phenomenal character, and was among probably the first, strong female characters we got in films when that just wasn't really what you got. Yeah, sure. In the noir period, you had femme fatales and things like that, and you would have some of those, but that wasn't really normal. She was really among the first. Do we have a Sarah Connor without Princess Leia? Eventually, maybe not right away. So Lucas has this roadmap available, and he completely blows it. And yeah, in the first film, yes, Padme is an interesting character. I certainly want to see more of her. I think there's a lot of good things. And if you've seen Natalie Portman in pretty much anything she's ever been in, I'm even talking like you go back to when she was like 9 years old in Leon in The Professional. Like she was fantastic in that movie, and she was like 9. So to see how badly she appears on screen in episodes 2 and 3, we'll get into it, but it's very perplexing. And I want to actually just go ahead and say, Hayden Christensen is actually a pretty good actor as well. What we see from him in episodes 2 and 3 is certainly not indicative of the man's talent and the rest of his career. And it's one of the perplexing things about this prequel trilogy is how can two actors that are actually really good be this bad together? And I certainly have some thoughts on that when we get to it.
Yeah. Harrison, where do you stand on Padme?
I always thought she was super cool in the first in the Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. Granted, I haven't seen Attack of the Clones for a while, but then I agree. It always bothered me, like when I did finally see Revenge of the Sith, which I'm excited to tell that story when we eventually get there. Like one of the leading thoughts I had is like, why is she just like sitting like all of Padme in episode 3 is her being pregnant and sitting in a room. Maybe she's brushing her hair and standing out a window. Like, that's it. What happened to her? I mean, she got pregnant. She's like, all right, I'm barefoot and pregnant. Annie, go take care of business with with Palpatine. Like it's stupid.
She's also getting her heart broken.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it's just it's dumb. And I have some thoughts about that when we get there. But yeah, Natalie Portman in episode 1, man, she was a heartthrob for 6-year-old me or however old I was. I was totally head over heels.
Yeah. Like I said, she was all the like that design was like the craze. It was amazing to see like just the weird fashion trend because there really was, like Rob, you said you remember it. It was just a very odd thing that came out of nowhere with her lipstick design and everything. But
that costume was everywhere at Halloween that year. Yeah, everywhere.
Yep. But I think we've all agreed the Phantom Menace is not as bad as we remember it, at least for Rob and myself. Harrison, you have some more fond memories overall of it. But the one thing that I'd like to kind of maybe close the gap with as we start to maybe incorporate Attack of the Clones here is this is where it started for me. Because again, Rob, when we started watching Star Wars, Jedi were powerful, they were smart. And in episodes 1 through 3 for me, and I talked about this in my reviews, and I still stand firm on this, the Jedi seem overly dumb. Especially given the later episodes. They can't tell just the most obvious thing in existence that they're being manipulated by Palpatine. It is like clear as day, these things that go on. And it's just like the equivalent if I walked up to you and I smacked you in the face and was like, well, let's go find the culprit. Like, let's figure it out. Like, no, you didn't. Like, I watched you. You're standing right there. I just feel like this trilogy, one of the things that I have a problem with, again, like my main sticking point is the fact that the Jedi are treated like idiots. Rob, do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, what's interesting is having just rewatched The Last Jedi recently, I had to like swallow some bile down my throat as I was saying the film's name. It's funny you mention that because Luke has a very specific line to Rey where she's talking about bringing the Jedi Order back, and he says at the height of their power they couldn't stop Palpatine from taking over. You know, I don't remember the exact line, but he actually kind of references it and almost goes right to the heart of what you're talking about, Matt, which is how did they let this happen? You know, an order that had been, you know, kind of space police and protectors of high ranking officials and kind of a military special forces unit, you know, all of these things at once. They've got all of these abilities that they can sense and see and be aware of all of these other things, and they somehow missed it. It makes almost no sense, especially when you think about all the different ways that the Force is used throughout all three trilogies. Nobody could sense that Palpatine was Force sensitive and a Force user, and some of the things he was clearly doing behind the scenes through the Force. It doesn't really hold up at all.
Yeah, Harrison, any thoughts on that?
I actually have a few, so I'll have to be brief. I realize that my love for the prequels is incredibly affected by nostalgia and just childhood experience. But now that I'm older, I'm more intelligent, and I think about things more analytically, one of the things that I love about the prequels that is probably in a large contrast to the way that Rob was talking about it is how good of a story it is in developing Anakin Skywalker into Darth Vader, right? I think that all of us can agree that George Lucas is one of the experts when it comes to like big plans. He's not good at dialogue. He's not good at scenes. He's not a great, I'm just going to say this. George Lucas is not a phenomenal director, but he is a great big picture writer. Like, he should be a producer on everything that's ever going to be a franchise because he's so good at seeing a big picture plan. And I think that for me, now that I'm older, the prequels are always about how does Anakin Skywalker, Luke's father, become Darth Vader in the original trilogy? And how did the Jedi become extinct and for Luke to have to be a new hope? How does all of that happen? And I think the prequels are an incredible trilogy at portraying how that does happen, and I love it for that reason. I think that it's an incredible tale about arrogance and neglect, those types of things, and I think it's incredibly interesting. And also arrogance of having to deem what's right and wrong when clearly being wrong about it. I think that the way that the Jedi Code is presented in the prequels is meant to make us believe that the Jedi are wrong about a lot of things, and I think that not many people agree with me in that. Maybe they do. I have no idea. I'm not trying to be arrogant in that, but like, young me would have never said that. I was like, the Jedi are the best. The Jedi. Emperor Palpatine's evil. Like, and then I was like, well, okay, this is a story about how the Jedi genuinely failed Anakin. So I love it for that reason. But at the same time, I totally understand that. Like, why are the Jedi so stupid? Like I get it's a great tale. Their role in Anakin's story to Darth Vader, I think, is really fitting. I think it's really great to see a high, powerful force fail in that way. I'm incredibly intrigued by it, and it's one of the reasons I love the prequels. But at the same time, why are they so stupid? Like I would love to see how they got to that point. Of course, I have my own ideas, but it's kind of like what led to this blatant arrogance and neglect in their responsibility that led to the rise of Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader. So I really like it, while also recognizing that it is in its existence flawed.
Yeah, I think there's some good points there, and I think Rob, your mention of what Luke says in the Last Jedi, I think it ties into what Harrison says. So that's something that I'll love to get into more, especially when we talk about the Last Jedi. Um, but as far as the Phantom Menace goes, as we wrap this part up, Rob, I think maybe we'll all have the same answer. Favorite scene from this movie?
Duel of the Fates. Yeah. The final battle between Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan. To me, it's peak Star Wars. You know, it's up there with some of the greatest moments and greatest scenes in this whole universe. The music is perfect. The characters are compelling. Even just the force fields as they're getting ready to come through, and they're just meditating, waiting to do battle. Up until the end of it. But that's my favorite.
Harrison?
Yeah, Duel of the Fates. How could you say anything else?
Whoop, I think we lost Harrison for a second here.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, got you back.
Can you hear me now? Okay, yeah,
Yes.
Duel of the Fates. I had nothing else to say. I was speechless. So, yeah, just Duel of the Fates.
Yeah, same thing. So as we get off Phantom Menace and we go to Attack of the Clones, I think it's obvious to say, let's just say favorite scene, the end credits, and we'll move on to Revenge of the Sith.
hey, my favorite scene. I have a different favorite scene. I have to say, I don't care how old or cynical I get or how much I recognize Attack of the Clones is hot garbage. I will always cheer for joy in that scene where they're in like the pit with the monsters, you know, and Anakin is like, he's talking to Obi-Wan. He's like, we came to rescue. And Obi-Wan like looks up at his change. He's like, good job. From that scene to the end of the movie, I'm having like the best time ever. I don't care how bad it looks CGI wise. I don't care how many flaws it has. I'm having a great time after that point. So,
okay. I do want to talk about Attack of the Clones a little bit.
I mean, do we have to though?
Yeah, I think we owe it to ourselves. I actually brought sand with me next to me so that I had it as a reminder for the movie.
Of course, gets into everything.
But yeah, you know, again, like with this movie, it's just to me, a lot of the things in this movie make no sense. One, out of nowhere. And I guess it happens every single day. Like you always see like, geez, how did those two get together? But like, it makes no sense why out of nowhere, Padme's like, oh, I just want you to know before we die, like I truly, deeply love you or whatever she says. And like, it's so bad the way she says it and the way she looks at him that if I were Anakin, I'd be like, never mind. I don't think I like you anymore. like
I specifically said when I talked about what I like about Attack of the Clones was the scene right after that to explicitly exclude the scene that you just talked about.
It's just, it's so bad. And again, you get just these weird dialogue exchanges where you're like, oh, that would have been interesting to see this between Obi-Wan and Anakin, to see them, you know, grow up. Because again, like, oh, Anakin's had all of this training in between and now he's just sort of grown up. But I think I just don't know what to say about Attack of the Clones anymore, because to me, it is, I don't think there's anything redeeming about it at all. Like, I don't know, Rob, like what do you think?
There's, oh God, the entire concept of the prequels should have been Lucas's Shakespearean tragedy. For those people who are listening to this that are not great lovers of Shakespeare, or not very familiar with Shakespeare, in most of the tragedies, you've got, before the thing even starts, you already know that these characters are going to die by the end of it. And the whole time you're watching how it happens. So it's no secret that by the end of the most lamentable tragedy of Romeo and Juliet, that your title characters are going to be keeled over. It's seeing how we get there. And that should have been the prequel trilogy. We know Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader. We know he becomes this terrible person that murders and enslaves and subjugates the galaxy and does the bidding of Palpatine, who's truly evil, and he's the fist of Palpatine, if you will. So how did we get from Anakin Skywalker to Darth Vader? That is what the prequel trilogy should have really been about. We already know it's going to happen. Make us feel something about it. Do I really feel anything coming out of episode 1 about, man, this little kid is going to become Darth Vader? A little bit. This film, you're 100% right about this, Matt. This film should have shown us that Anakin and Obi-Wan were really becoming close, partners. There was trust. There was, a brotherly mentoring almost, Obi-Wan being the older brother, mentoring the younger brother. We should have seen that. And Matt, you're 100% right about that too. So much of Star Wars happens off camera. When they give us that great, crawl title at the beginning of the film, there's a lot of stuff they're summarizing for us that happens off camera. That sometimes is actually almost maybe more interesting than what they do present to us. In a large part, I think that's what we have with Attack of the Clones. I mean, just the whole concept for this film. This is not the movie we should have gotten. We should have gotten something very different. We should have gotten something that at least it leads us to see Anakin, and how his relationships are forming and developing with Padme and Obi-Wan, so that by the third film, when both of those things break, we feel something about it. And whether or not you do or you don't, in episode 3, I feel something about one of those relationships and literally nothing about the other. Harrison, something you said earlier, George Lucas is great about the big picture stuff. You're 100% right. I agree with you absolutely about that. Nobody should allow George Lucas to write dialogue ever again, because holy cow, exactly. In this film, the dialogue is terrible. It is, watching Anakin and Padme on screen is more wooden than a whole scene with just Groot in it by himself, just running around saying, "I'm Groot." There's more wood there than him. And these are more good actors. One type of wood.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. These are good actors. Like, this was
Ralph Boner.
we had to get a Ralph Boner reference in. Nice. But yes, they're both actually good actors, but they're given crap dialogue and they're given crap direction to work with.
Yeah, and again, this plays on the trope of the Jedi are dumb, because unless it's been said, and I've missed out on this after all these years, like legitimately, how does Yoda not sense what's going on when he's talking to Anakin? Like, how does he hide it? Is it Palpatine helping? Like, because he knows what's going on with Anakin, because there's times where it's like, okay, well, if you can see things as a Force user, you should see what's going on with Anakin. You should understand what he's saying right now, especially in Revenge of the Sith, which we'll get to more. But again, it plays on the plot that the Jedi are just, and maybe it is arrogance. Maybe Harrison's onto something. I'll love to hear more of those thoughts, but their arrogance just makes them unbelievably blind to things that should be obvious. Harrison, what else do you have to say about this movie, man?
Attack of the Clones used to be my favorite Star Wars. Like, I'm talking like as a kid, like a long time ago. That was the one that I had the most toys from. That was the one that I probably watched the most. I loved Attack of the Clones. I will say I also genuinely love the fight between Dooku and Yoda. I think that scene is great. Star Wars. And it was like a year ago. It was a while ago. It's like, I'm going to rewatch Attack of the Clones. Like, I used to love that. And now that I'm older, I recognize that people don't. And I watched it. I was like, wow, this really is bad. Like, yeah, I was surprised how bad it was, how blinded I was as a child. Attack of the Clones is here to set up further the romance and the marriage, the child conception between Anakin and Padme. If you're gonna do that, we need romance, not whatever, it's burning inside of me. Do you feel it too? Or whatever he says in that dumb fireplace scene that just like is the most horrible written scene probably ever. It's not good. You're trying to set up the relationship between Anakin and Padme. You're trying to set up motivation for Anakin to be enticed by the dark side. You're trying to set up motivation for the clones. You're trying to set up payoffs that happen later in the original trilogy and in episode 3. And for that reason, I like Attack of the Clones for what it allows to happen in Revenge of the Sith. But as far as Attack of the Clones, like, I will probably fast forward through the beginning of it and start with that scene I watched it when I have a Star Wars marathon. Like, outside of that, I'm not going to ever watch Attack of the Clones. It is not good, which is sad, because I would have loved to see a relationship building between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and I would have loved to see that dynamic where Obi-Wan, in his shortcomings of being someone who is given an apprentice way too soon, failing Anakin as a master for someone who is way too powerful way too soon. That would be an amazing dynamic and would add to the story of the arrogance of the Jedi, thinking that they're so smart and they're so good that a Sith couldn't rise underneath their nose because they've got their force touch on everything, when clearly they're blind to it. Like, that would have been so much better in telling the story of arrogance of the Jedi and the Jedi Council. Instead, we just get the trash of Clone Wars that tries to do those things, but ultimately is just a setup to use really bad CGI for clones to just execute Order 66 later. Like, this is set up for payoffs later, and none of the setup is done well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think really the only scene that I really like, and it's 10 seconds long, and then it's totally ruined 17 seconds later, is that slight glimmer of hope when Anakin is not a whiny, oh my God, my parents took my iPhone kid. And he murders the Tusken Raiders. I hope everybody realizes what I say when I'm like, that's the best scene, is when he murders people. But just, it actually, for like 10 seconds, shows the emotion of why he would be tempted to turn. But again, then he just goes into his raspy whine to Padme, like, about how he hates them and they're animals and he slaughtered them like animals. Like, oh my God, I want to spray him in the face with a water bottle. Like, it's just, it's so
the women and the children too.
I will say that scene, sadly, is a great moment where we could have seen Hayden Christensen's potential if given better direction. Like, with what he was given, he is doing a phenomenal job, but he is just given a turd, and he's trying to polish a turd, and it just does not go well.
Yeah. So, Rob, serious question: do you have a favorite scene from this movie at all?
Not really. I mean, there's some interesting things that are happening when they go to the clone facility, but only in relation to other media within Star Wars. I gotta say that I'm noticing a trend with what we're getting from shows on Disney Plus, and I'm starting to kind of hate it, in that they're kind of making me feel the need to go back and rewatch the worst parts of their film franchises. Like, if you think about this film and how the events of this film play into, certainly the Clone Wars, but even to the events that we get in The Mandalorian are in some way a direct result of the things that happen in this film. Watching WandaVision kind of made me want to go back and rewatch Age of Ultron for so many of the things that were set up that way. And with Loki coming up, I kind of want to almost rewatch The Dark World to kind of see Loki's transformation into a different character, to have a better understanding, even though that won't be necessarily this one. I don't like that Disney Plus is doing that, because these are not good movies, and I don't want to have to feel like I need to rewatch them to really fully enjoy where the character is developing to.
All right. Harrison, I mean, you pretty much summed that up. Your favorite scene is kind of pretty much the end, like the whole
Yeah.
ending scene.
Yeah, I like that entire moment, and I'll stand by that. Even the moment of Anakin standing alone with R2 and his robot hand marrying Padme is a great moment of good tragedy writing, but everything before that ruins it. Like, yeah. So the ending I do enjoy.
All right. As I mentioned though earlier, the prequel trilogy is the top 10 for my show, Matt Goes to the Movies, for downloaded episodes. Attack of the Clones is actually number 3 for all-time downloads for this show, which actually brings me to us to number 2. It recently just dipped from number 1 is Revenge of the Sith. And Rob, we were going back and forth on the Facebook page. A lot of people show this as their number 1 Star Wars movie, Revenge of the Sith. Harrison, you certainly talked about it at the open, your admiration for this movie. So Revenge of the Sith, a lot better than I think the first 2, but for me, still a very flawed movie, but certainly better than what came before it. There's some great moments in this movie. Rob, kick us off a little bit with Revenge.
Yeah, so by the time 3 had come out, 2 was regarded so poorly. I actually think that 2 was so bad that it retroactively made people think less of 1. When Phantom Menace came out, there was a lot of the initial reviews were excited about this new direction, about where Star Wars was going to go, what we would see from these new characters. And then when 2 was as bad as it was, I think people kind of went back and retroactively kind of hated on the first one. So then we get to Revenge of the Sith. And you're right, it is a much better movie. And I think to me, kind of this film saves the prequel trilogy having any redeeming value by what was pulled off in this. Yes, there are absolutely still problems. There is not a single scene with Anakin and Padme in this movie that works. In fact, I'm not sure in any time Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman are on screen together, I'm not sure there's a single time that they're in a scene that works. Maybe the wedding scene, but that's because there's no dialogue. Outside of that, I don't think there's a single one that works. But in this film, the Palpatine and Anakin scenes are very compelling. The Obi-Wan and Anakin scenes are very good. So I want to talk about something. I recently rewatched this film on its own, based on knowing that we're going to be talking about it, and certainly the amount of love that that this film has been getting on our Facebook page for the show. I wanted to go back and rewatch this just so I could have a pretty firm idea of where I would rank this when we eventually get to the rankings. And this was the first time I've ever watched this film separate from the first 2. Typically if I'm watching Star Wars, I'm kind of watching them in order. And I've not ever done it where I just watched 3 by itself without recently seeing 1 and 2. And I'll tell you, I recommend it. Like, I do it now. Like, do this tomorrow. Do this on the weekend. Watch this film by itself. Pretend the first 2 don't exist. Pretend the first 2 are literally just the crawl at the beginning of the film, and that tells you everything you need to know. And just accept that this is the prequel film for what we get in the original trilogy, and it actually works a lot better. It's much more interesting that way. There's no dialogue from Jar Jar. He appears in one scene, doesn't say a word, so we get that. There's, like I said, there's still some bad scenes with Padme and Anakin, but outside of that, this plays out much more like the compelling tragedy that we want it to be. And it really works as a standalone film and not the cap of a trilogy. It's much better that way.
Harrison, go a little bit deeper. Rob, I think you made some good points, but Harrison, between the 2 of us, I really think like this is the 3 of us, the 2 of us, me and Rob, like this is your movie from what I understand. Like you really, really like this movie.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I'm gonna spoiler for my ranking later when we get to that in the second part. This is number one Star Wars for me. Is it the best movie subjectively? No. Clearly, there are flaws. I agree with a lot of what Rob said, but objectively, sitting down to watch Star Wars, this is the one that I love to watch the most. I didn't have time to, sadly, but when I was planning on watching Star Wars for this episode we're recording, I planned on rewatching Revenge of the Sith, and I was genuinely excited for it. Like, I can't wait to rewatch it again. Like I said, I had watched it so many times. My brother and I had it practically memorized. We still quoted a ton. We had the entire dialogue and fight choreography for Anakin and Obi-Wan's fight memorized. We reenacted it thousands and thousands and thousands of times. I still have the lightsaber that we did it with, so on and so forth. I love Revenge of the Sith. I just want to tell this story just because I think it's really interesting. It's kind of funny. So Revenge of the Sith came out in 2005 when I was 9. I was 9 years old, and it's PG-13 for people who didn't know. And my family at the time had extremely strict rules that none of our kids were our kids. None of the kids, me and my siblings, were allowed to watch a PG-13 movie until we were 13. Like, not a single one. I was the third child of 5, so my 2 older siblings, they weren't allowed to watch PG-13 movies until they were 13. So I was not allowed to see Revenge of the Sith. And I remember being jealous. My dad went to this theater with my mom, like, opening night, which is something my dad's never done. Like, I don't remember the last time him and my mom went to a movie together. It was probably Revenge of the Sith. And so anyway, I remember years later, it was my friend's 13th birthday. He turned 13 in April. I turned 13 in July. So it was like a few months away from my 13th birthday. And we were at his birthday party. We were having a sleepover, and he had Revenge of the Sith. And then I think it was Goblet of Fire. Whatever the next Harry Potter film was at the time, it was PG-13. I think it was Goblet of Fire. I don't remember. Either way, they had the two there, and we were trying to decide what to watch. And I was the only one of my friends who hadn't seen Revenge of the Sith, even though we all love Star Wars. And I remember calling my parents because we voted to watch Revenge of the Sith, and I called my parents to get permission to watch Revenge of the Sith because it was PG-13 a few months before I turned 13, and I got permission. It was like the best day of my entire life. I still remember exactly where I was sitting in my friend's house, in exactly what chair. I can see the TV. I know what pajamas I was wearing. Like, that day is frozen in my head forever. I will never forget that day. I loved it. And then I watched it with my brother because we had it on DVD, and we finally got to watch it. You know, even though he was younger than me, I didn't care that he was breaking the rules, and he got to watch it way younger than me. Anyway, I'm making this too long-winded. There was just a moment where, like, I was finally seeing Revenge of the Sith, and watching it. I'll wrap it up by saying this. Even when I watch it now, my heart is broken by Anakin's choice every time. And there's something special about a movie that I can watch, knowing it's a tragedy, knowing how it's going to end, and still hope and think, Anakin, come on, do the right thing this time. Don't become Darth Vader. Every time. Like, the movie is not going to change. He is going to become Darth Vader at the end of Revenge of the Sith every time. But every time I watch it, I hold out hope that he will choose differently. And I don't know how it does that, but it does. And there's a moment where I just bawl my eyeballs out. I just lose it when they're having the scene on Mustafar, and Obi-Wan and Anakin are talking to each other, and Obi-Wan's being really sincere and honest, and he's like, "You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you." And then he walks away saying, "I have failed you." It is like I really lose it. There's something about the relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin that really meant something to me, and so there's just like a lot of course, that moment on my friend's 13th birthday where I got permission to watch the first PG-13 movie of my life a few months before I was 13. It was a big deal, and it was Star Wars. Like that definitely helps. But there's something about it that, like, this is what I want from Star Wars. It takes itself really seriously while also being really funny and kind of lighthearted and dorky and a little bit silly. There's a great music. There's awesome lightsaber fights. The lore and the further universe establishing of things is great. I mean, Anakin becomes Darth Vader. Rob said in our group chat we have that first breath we get of Darth Vader, it chills your bones. I love Revenge of the Sith. Yeah, Padme interacting with Anakin is just not great, but every time I watch it, it reminds me why I love Star Wars. This is why I love Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is why I love Anakin, so on and so forth. So I'm probably not conveying it to be best because it's just like an emotional core of who I am. that Revenge of the Sith is like Star Wars. Like it's the Star Wars. It always was, always has been, and probably will be forever. Granted, it does have its flaws, and I'm totally willing to admit and talk about them. But there's something about Revenge of the Sith that from that first barrel roll with Obi-Wan and Anakin, I cannot stop smiling. I every moment this is Star Wars, and this is why I love Star Wars. So yeah, I'm gonna gush about it way too long, so I should probably stop talking.
No, I love the story. I mean, I was sneaking viewings of Halloween and Friday the 13th when I could. So that's like a funny story, but for me, Revenge of the Sith, I certainly think it's better than the first two. I like it a lot more now, but Harrison, you said that you still will, be like, come on, do the right thing. And, there's one scene in this movie that never used to do anything for me, but over time and rewatching it, and I don't know, maybe it's the announcement of Hayden Christensen coming back for the Obi-Wan show, or watching more media with Darth Vader, like Clone Wars and Rebels, and even reading the Darth Vader comic, which is really tying into like things that happened in Rise of Skywalker and things like that. There's one scene in this movie that now gets me every single time I watch it. And I mean, really gets me. Like, it breaks me down. And it's the last time because I never really thought about it, that Obi-Wan and Anakin talk as friends. And they're going to leave each other, and the lighting, I'll give Lucas credit, or whoever did this. If it was unintentional, kudos to you for just happenstance having these two characters stand where they are. But Obi-Wan is standing in complete light, and Anakin is standing in this like hangar area in pretty much darkness. He is shrouded, but he says to him, "Goodbye, old friend." And Anakin says to Obi-Wan, "May the Force be with you." It is the last time that they ever talk to each other as friends. And it never used to get me, but it absolutely crushes my soul every time I see it now.
Matt, we've actually talked about this before, and I was kind of waiting for that scene when I did my recent rewatch, because it's really the first time I've rewatched it since you and I've had that conversation. And I definitely encourage listeners to rewatch this film and pay attention to that scene, because when you know to look for it, it hits a little different.
Yeah, Harrison, I know your thoughts, but has that scene been emotional for you? Was it something that you picked up on? Like, to me, that is just, it's like the best thing. It's sad, but it's just, when you were like, this is Star Wars for me, like, that is what draws so much emotion for me. And that's why I love Star Wars, is because there's times when it draws real raw emotion from me.
Oh yeah, that's such a great scene. Especially with what I said, the opening barrel roll, right? We get the title crawl, we see the space battle, and it pans to Obi-Wan and Kenobi ship, and they do a barrel roll in unison. And it's like, we see these two people as like ultimate partners. Like they are the best of friends. Obi-Wan is a mentor to Anakin. They're equals, but not like there's just so much character growth and like character unity, for lack of better words, for the two of them that is so endearing. And then to see it end, and knowing that it's going to end, and knowing how later they confront each other, and having them say goodbye in that way is, it rips your guts out. And I got to add, I don't know if the lighting was intentional in that, but this is one thing that I should have mentioned in the opening. One of the things I love about Star Wars is every trilogy, everything about Star Wars, the costuming is next level in all regards. Costume and production design in every way is amazing, but particularly with Jedi and the main characters, and whether they're wearing light clothes or dark clothes, and how it presents their internal struggle with the light and dark side. I love it. It's really great. And that's one of those moments. Obi-Wan is in all white in the light. Anakin is in all black in the dark. And it's just, they're saying goodbye only to later confront each other on Mustafar, to go through that, to have Obi-Wan admit to failing him, to later come back and have that final battle on the Death Star to assist his son Luke. Like, there's so much about it that's like, wow, how does Star Wars have this much emotion about it? I don't know. I think it's amazing that it does. I mean, like, there's R2-D2 is a beeping trash can. Like seriously, how does this same thing bring out these emotions that like it just rips your heart out? I don't know. I think it's it's proof. It's why we love Star Wars.
Yeah. I think, again, this is why I like, and I was glad to do this show with you guys, because talking about this, it brings back the emotion, it brings back everything, but obviously we just skip by Attack of the Clones, but it makes me appreciate like Revenge of the Sith more, and like, okay, I do like it more than I originally thought I did, or maybe even more than I did when we first, we're going to do this. And I was like thinking about my thoughts right now during this episode and everything like that. But just sparking the conversation, it was one of the things that was so great. Rob, like I said, you and I had some back and forth with, people who were interested in this topic that, again, I don't care if if you hate The Last Jedi, if you like Attack of the Clones, if you say Revenge of the Sith is the best Star Wars movie, which I was surprised, not because I care that somebody thinks this is the best movie, but I just haven't heard that from a lot of people. And so many people say that Revenge of the Sith is their favorite Star Wars movie, which is like super fascinating to me. Not because I want to argue why it shouldn't be. I just love to hear why it is for a fan of Star Wars. I love that. Like, why does it resonate with you so much? But one thing that I just want to cap like my thoughts on for this is one of the reasons why this movie still ranks a little bit lower for me is the continued like stupidity of the Jedi, specifically when it comes to Anakin. He's deliberately talking to Yoda about someone close to him dying, but somehow like Yoda can't sense this. His relationship with Padme is somehow a secret, even though like in the beginning she runs to him in this giant open room and hugs him and is like, yeah, everybody should be gone now. Like, we're supposed to keep this a secret. And in this huge city, they live together, but I don't know, like, don't ask, don't tell. So some of those things are kind of like unforgivable to me, but it certainly doesn't hinder the movie like it used to for me, because I used to just be like obsessed with how just obvious certain things were. And it really brought down the experience, but not so much anymore does it hold the same regard to me.
Matt, you're right. It's kind of weird. Like, if you have a friend and your friend has a crush on this other person, like, you kind of know, like, it's kind of hard for them not for you to know. Like, and you consider like all the places that Jedi go and the things that they do. It's not exactly like he's got a wide social circle. So for it not to be obvious to Yoda, always seems strange. And I guess if we're talking about things that are sort of strange about this, I mean, to send Luke back to Tatooine, where Anakin was from, and not change his last name at all, it's always kind of bothered me a bit. It's always seemed sort of odd. Like, you wouldn't look there. Like, you wouldn't look for this kid named Skywalker. Like, I don't know. It's always felt a little strange.
Yeah. That is one thing that they do. And again, like Rob, you talked about this. Some of these things, again, and the series is awesome, so it's not a bad thing to actually read it. But some of these things are talked about in the Darth Vader series that they've been doing. And it makes sense when you read it. But again, just like, you shouldn't have plot holes that you then later go back and be like, oh, well, 20 years later, we made a comic book to explain why this is the way it is. You're just, lucky that you can still get to do that. Maybe sometimes don't have so many plot holes in your movie, but
it'll be less of a problem that way. Yeah.
But no, like there's some really good things that are explained in this Darth Vader series. And again, the read is awesome. There's a great part of the run is him actually going and trying to find out exactly what happened to Padme because he doesn't believe the Emperor. That arc is like unbelievable for that comic series. So if anybody wants to start reading that, I would highly recommend it because it's fantastic. But speaking of Darth Vader, he gets called Darth Vader before he has the suit. But and maybe it hits a little bit differently, specifically Rob and myself. So Harrison, I want to get your thoughts last on this, but Rob, I know I just anticipated like, wow, this will be the first time like we see Vader in the suit again. Like new. It was just like this holy moment, so to speak, where it was like, oh my God. And I thought the scene was really good. I really like them showing like operating on him. And just this brief scene where the mask comes down, you almost see like this fear in Anakin's eyes, like, okay, this is like really like it, like this is my life now. Like, I don't know. I've always picked up that there was just like this moment of realization right before the helmet comes on. But man, when it drops, holy cow. Like I can get goosebumps talking about it right now because seeing him just brought up on the table, it's a little bit ruined and towards the end of it when he crushes everything. But wow, that scene, I mean, that's like, for me, that's a YouTube clip to just, I want to see that again. Let me pull it up. I love it.
Yeah, we referenced it before, but on the recent rewatch, I mean, and literally every time that I've watched this film, when the helmet drops down, you get that little puff of mist or whatever from the last bit of air escaping from under the helmet, and he makes his first like, yes, he was already Darth Vader before he was in the suit, fine, whatever, but to us, Darth Vader is the guy in the black, like Oakland Raiders helmet looking thing. Like that's the guy. Like that's, with the samurai sort of look. Like, and when he takes that first breath and you hear the Darth Vader, oh my God, it's just, it's chills every time. And it's a great moment. And then it's kind of ruined a little bit later by, him screaming no for what feels like about an hour and a half.
Yeah, I mean, oh God. I just need to skip that part because I'll go on a soapbox. Harrison, what was it like? I mean, obviously you told us your story about being able to see this movie, but do you remember how iconic was that moment? Did it mean something for you? Is it like, how did you feel with that?
Yeah, wow. How do you talk about that? I will say, if I can bring it back a little bit, I remember during the Mustafar fight, that scene that I already kind of talked about, one of the things that instantly struck me the first time I was watching it, and hits me every single time I watch it again, is Anakin, in his arrogance, tries to pull Obi-Wan's move on him. Like, Obi-Wan's move is to flip over someone and chop him in half. He tries to use that on him and fails and gets his arms and his legs cut off, and then he's burned up by flames. That is what causes him to end up in this iconic suit. Like that suit, the thing that is keeping him alive is also a reminder of his undoing, which would be a bummer. But that was like one thing that from the moment he got his limbs cut off to the moment when he got the suit, I was like, wow, that it adds so much more meaning to some guy walking around in a black samurai suit in space. But that scene, there's this iconic squeak, like as the helmet's going on, I was like, like I don't know, I hope people who've seen the Revenge of the Sith probably know what I'm talking about. I can't do it well. That noise is like frozen in my head because I remember just like in awe. That same scene where it shows Hayden Christensen's face and the look in his eyes, like this is my future almost. It's just great. Taking that first breath, the sound design, the cinematography of it with the smoke and the lighting is just like, and there it is. Like that's the final nail in the coffin, so to speak. It's such a great scene. Same thing, gives me chills talking about it because it's like, oh, all of it that is about to come for you, poor Anakin. Very, very great scene. We can talk about the prequels, how they're not well directed. We talked about that one scene where Anakin and Obi-Wan part, and this scene, I think, are some of the best directed scenes, like, period, in movies in general. And I think it's because these are the beats that George Lucas gets so well, and so those moments are directed with that same clear vision that he has, and it makes the scenes really great.
Yeah. One thing that in regards to that and then seeing Vader, one scene that I love, and not only do I love it because it was a cool shot of seeing Vader stand with the Emperor and Vader crosses his arms and they're looking out at the construction of the Death Star. Rob, and maybe it's the same thing for you, I love this scene because it started, what you saw on screen was Star Wars for me. You went back to the old ships. You went back to the old uniforms. It lined up with what I saw in Star Wars A New Hope, because I wasn't a fan of the ship designs and the CGI in the prequels. So seeing that like line up, like that really brought it home for me. And I remember just being like, Star Wars. Like, that to me was emotional as well. Like, oh, it's so cool to see like the original set pieces and designs.
Yeah, you see, the Grand Moff Tarkin there as a CG character. You see those, Empire uniforms that we've known and love. We certainly, I think one of the things that I'm taking from this conversation, and Matt, our conversation with some of the listeners leading up to it, and hopefully people listening to this right now, is that your idea of what Star Wars is definitely going to be very based on where it came from for you. So I definitely, on every watch of this film, I have a very similar reaction to what you're describing, because it's like, okay, this moment takes us into what I know of as Star Wars, like what I grew up with, what I picture in my head, when I think of Star Wars. It doesn't, Star Wars doesn't really allow for logic. It's always going to have an emotional connection for the audience, and to try to divorce that emotional connection and try to make like rational thoughts around Star Wars is just not something you could do. Like, just don't even bother trying. Like, it's okay. Like, if you have this feeling that the prequel is your Star Wars, no one's ever going to convince you otherwise, and really they shouldn't try to. Like, it's definitely that sensation. And yeah, seeing the Death Star being built, hearing his voice, seeing him in the suit, seeing those characters, dressed like the Empire, seeing Palpatine in the robe with the messed up face. That's like, okay, this looks familiar to me now.
Yeah, definitely. Harrison, did you, because again, like, this is your experience, so to speak, with Star Wars. Was it a weird transition for you? Like, wait a minute, why does everything look different? Because you hadn't seen any other. Have you seen any other Star Wars before you saw any of the prequels?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm not sure in which order I watched them. I'm pretty sure I watched The Phantom Menace first, but I do know that I had seen the original trilogy multiple times before I saw Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
Because like I said, we had the original trilogy in the DVD set, and I watched it all the time with my dad. And then I had to wait until I was almost 13 which was like 4 years after
Gotcha.
Revenge of the Sith was released. So like when it got to that scene, I was like, oh, like here we go. Like this is how it all goes together. Like it was like exciting. Like it is one thing, you know, like it was exciting. I love that scene. I agree. It's fun to like almost have like a return from form, especially now in my adulthood where I appreciate the original trilogy so much more. It's like, oh, now it's getting good. Like no more complaints. Like, you know, like, yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah. One thing that we haven't talked about, and it's actually my favorite scene, and maybe this is going to sound weird, but the scene with Anakin and Palpatine where they're watching like the Cirque du Soleil bubble show. That is my absolute favorite scene of this movie. Number one, I love Palpatine's line of, how the dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. I love that line. I absolutely loved it in Rise of Skywalker, but there's something about that scene that I love it, and I could watch it over and over and over again because for some reason he's not good at dialogue, but everything about that is to me 100% done correctly. The dialogue, the camera angles, the background, like everything about it is perfect. That's my absolute 100% favorite scene in this movie. Rob, any thoughts on that?
You're 100% correct about how well this works. I said it before that all of the Anakin and Palpatine scenes just work. You can see him baiting the hook. You can see him setting the trap. You can see Anakin falling for it, hook, line, and sinker. I mean, it's and he just plays him. You know, it's fantastic to watch. It's so stealthy. It's so just he's playing so far many moves ahead that to think that one man, even though he's a Sith, could completely outsmart the rest of the galaxy single-handedly, including Master Yoda, including Mace Windu, all of them. He outplayed all of them and basically rose to power and took over. You can see how that was able to happen in scenes like this. And there's one or two other scenes, he's use my knowledge, I beg you, it's just, it's awesome.
Yeah, he's not too good with a lightsaber, but he's awesome at manipulating. His lightsaber fight is pathetic.
It's terrible.
There's a reason why they don't show him, like, except for his face and making like weird facial expressions, like his tie stuck in a blender. But Harrison, what do you think of this?
Yeah, Reddit memes aside, that scene is iconic. It is so good. Because we already know how Emperor Palpatine tries to manipulate weakness. We saw him try to do the same thing with Luke. We know that this is routine. So now we understand how he made Darth Vader his lapdog. And like that moment, of course, like I said, Attack of the Clones is good because it allows for payoff later. This is the payoff, and it's done so well. He does the evil head turn like 10 times, and every single time is menacing and makes your skin crawl. It's so good. Use my power, I beg of you. He's talking about Darth Plagueis. He can save others from death, but not himself. That scene is great. If you are an emotionally broken individual, you're gonna go with the evil head turn dude because he's persuasive. I just love that scene, and the lighting in it is great. The way that he says "leave us," it's so good. The people get up and walk away. Great scene. I'm glad you mentioned it because I kind of forget about it because it's like there's so much else that happens in Revenge of the Sith that I loved. It's like it's easy to forget the dialogue scenes because again, George Lucas isn't the best of them, but this is one of the ones that really is like, yeah, we should talk about it. This scene is great. I really, really love that scene.
Yeah, quick plug. If anybody, if you haven't, again, get it off Amazon or get it off of like Barnes and Noble, or you can just pretty much search it and find it. the Star Wars Darth Plagueis book is absolutely like frickin' phenomenal if you want more backstory on Palpatine and how he, started to learn the ways of the dark side of the Force. The book is phenomenal. I've actually read it 3 times because it's so good. Great book. But so Harrison, again, because this is just, where you really just, is this safe to say that this is where like really you started like the love for Star Wars is because of Revenge of the Sith?
Let me say it this way. The reason that Star Wars, let me start this sentence over. The reason that I still love Star Wars, and it's a staple of my movie experience, continuing out of childhood, is because of Revenge of the Sith. Like, Star Wars was great in my childhood. I loved it. Like I mentioned, I thought Attack of the Clones was like the best thing ever. How many times did I reenact these lightsaber battles? Too many to count, but like there's a reason that it continued with me beyond like fun toys, and that's because of Revenge of the Sith. But also how now, even more so now, I've come to love the original trilogy and the prequels in their own way. But wow, I'm getting way up in the weeds. Yes, Revenge of the Sith is why I still like Star Wars now. That was way too long of an answer. I apologize.
No. I'm fascinated to hear like because this is the first time that we've been able to do this in depth. So I'm just like fascinated by your history with Star Wars and how you like sort of came into this universe, because it's much, much different than how Rob and I came to be aware of Star Wars, but it's super fascinating to me. So your answers can be as long as you want.
I enjoy talking about it as well. It's fun. It's just to elaborate a little bit more. It's really interesting. Like the original trilogy as a kid drove me nuts. 1, because it looked old, but 2, it was in one of those really annoying like DVD box sets where the 3 DVD cases like slid into like the plastic, cube thing. Mm-hmm. But it was like perfect width of the 3 DVD cases, so like get your finger in there to grab one was like nearly impossible. I don't know if you guys have it. I hated it. Like one of the
I had them on VHS, so sorry.
Yeah. One of the reasons I didn't want to watch the original trilogy is because I just didn't want to get this stupid DVD out. Like, it was genuinely really hard. So yeah, it was really interesting because Star Wars was one of those things that would have been really easy to move on from if it wasn't for Revenge of the Sith. Like, because it was mainly fun. Like, when I think about my memories of Star Wars, I mainly think about my experience with toys, playing with my friends, that type of thing, outside of having my brain blown on my friend's 13th birthday for Revenge of the Sith. And that was like one of the reasons, like, okay, now I'm a bit older, I want to come back to it. And later found appreciation for the original trilogy, even still with that stupid DVD box set. So it's interesting to talk about this because like these are experiences that have always been a part of me, but I don't think I've ever like sat back to analyze like, well, why is it that way? So it's really fun for me, kind of cathartic.
Yeah, I mean, we had Titanic on 2 VHSs, so
yeah.
But the original trilogy, it's funny, and we'll get into that too, but I often wonder, Rob, and this is just like a hypothetical thought, and I don't think there is, but you wonder if George Lucas ever thinks about what he would want to do, or if there's anything he'd want to add, because one of the things that like notoriously gets talked about with the original trilogy is the special editions. That guy's taken a lot of money from me, because back in the day I would buy the new like cover art sets and then special editions. But part of me thinks that the way that this prequel trilogy is laid out, especially going back and like looking at the things that people said to George Lucas about like, this doesn't work, or you should like get rid of young Anakin. I really do believe, for better or worse, the prequel trilogy is exactly how George Lucas wanted it.
It's hard to disagree with that. When you think about somebody who was in possession of intellectual property like Star Wars, there wasn't going to be a whole lot of people that were going to tell him he couldn't do what he wanted with it, for better or for worse. Certainly, if there would have been more voices involved that could have come in with that red pen to be like, hey, this dialogue, people don't talk that way. Like nobody ever has looked at another person and said, Annie, you're breaking my heart. Like I can hear it like in my head. It's so bad. Like, oh my God, it's terrible. Like it's terrible. You know, and I just got to say it, is it's over Anakin. I have the high ground. Is this the Save Martha of Star Wars?
Ooh, hang on, Harrison. What? what?
No, not
what do
even
you think?
That's one of the best lines ever. I don't know. It's been memed so much that I don't know. The internet's weird. I think it kind of depends.
Right.
Like you were talking about.
That's
earlier,
why I think it's the Save
depends.
Martha of Star Wars.
I think it depends on how you experience Star Wars. For someone like me, that's like one of the most iconic lines in a good way of all of Star Wars. Because I grew up with the prequel series, and it was like, how many times did I stand on a slide with my arms open above my brother? It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. And then I'd slide down the slide, and then he'd jump over, and I'd pretend to cut his legs off. Like, how many times did I do that? Millions. So for me, yeah, but it is what prequel memes makes it impossible to seriously watch the prequels.
Yeah, if you've spent any time on the internet ever, it changes how you watch the prequels.
Yeah, it does make it a little. It sometimes makes it hard not to see memes with some of these.
When the memes are better than the dialogue, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
I wanted to comment about.
Go ahead, Harrison.
Oh, I just briefly wanted to comment about what you were saying about is this George Lucas's vision? Is this what he ultimately wanted? I've never thought about that, but in the split second you asked the question, this is the first thing I thought of. There have only been two individuals who had the privilege of both writing and directing a Star Wars film. And that is George Lucas and another great man that we'll talk about later with Rob. But
oh no,
George Lucas is up to that point the only one who ever had wrote and directed Star Wars. He came back after the fame of the original trilogy years later, and he kind of had, like the Jedi, the arrogance kind of well, I can do what I want. I don't care what you think with your red pen. This is my story. This is my trilogy. I'm writing. I'm directing it. Let me do what I want. And I think the flaws we have of George Lucas's auteurness, for lack of better words, is evident, and this is clearly what he wanted to do, or else I think someone would have taken out the flaws. So it's really interesting to think about. I wonder now, looking back, if he's still proud of it.
Yeah, I think he is. Again, I've never had a one-on-one conversation with him, but I think he probably does maybe appreciate the fact that yeah, you know what? I did what I wanted to do. Because again, you can go and you can watch a lot of clips of people telling him no. They are not hard to find on YouTube at all. So it leads me to believe that this is what he wanted to do. So yeah, I think again, for better or worse, because I think in the special editions of the original trilogy, I think a lot of the stuff that was added was for worse. I don't think it really fits, but I certainly have a lot fonder memories of the original. Rob, I think it's really interesting what you said about just go back and, because I've never done it. If I've watched Star Wars, it had always been, I need to watch it in order. Now, it's interesting too, how would you watch it in order? Do you always do the prequels? Do you do the original trilogy? When I rewatch, I always have to do it now in episode order, which, 1 through 9. I can't watch it any other way, but I think you bring an interesting point to watch Revenge of the Sith as a true standalone movie. Like, okay, you understand that these guys were friends. They trained together. Anakin was shown the ways by Obi-Wan, and then he turns into Darth Vader. So I don't know if my need to do things in order will allow me to watch Revenge of the Sith. Like, watch Revenge of the Sith.
You kind of have to remove some OCD-ness from it. Like because it's hard for me to just watch something of a series on its own. Like I can do it with the MCU pretty easily, but that's because they only lightly connect from one to the next. You know what I mean? Like they do stand alone on their own pretty well. But yeah, I can't. It's really hard for me to do with Star Wars.
Yeah, Harrison. I mean, what? Obviously, I don't think there's any need for you to do that, considering, besides Attack of the Clones, you definitely, are fonder on Phantom Menace than Rob and I, but we both admitted that it's not as bad as, what originally kind of went out. What are your thoughts on Rob's position there of watching Revenge of the Sith by itself?
I think people would realize how good it is. I think they would. That's probably the reason I love it, is after that first time I watched it on my friend's 13th birthday. That's like the only movie I watched for probably 4 months. I watched it so many times, and I've actually done that a lot. I've watched. My brother and I have sat down so many times together, even as we're older now, to watch Revenge of the Sith together. Maybe, now that you point out, maybe that's one of the reasons why it specifically is so loved, because I've just watched it specifically as a standalone film so much. I think it would really do a service to it, because the prequels leading up to it honestly aren't great. I love them, but I can admit that they're not good. I think that I leave it at that. I've been way too long. Watch Revenge of the Sith as a standalone. It's really good.
All right. Well, gentlemen, that concludes the prequel trilogy, which was a lot of fun. Gave me some new perspective. Certainly gave me some things to think about in terms of maybe watching Revenge of the Sith. But now we're going to go into the original trilogy, which Harrison, I'm now just going to be so fascinated to hear your thoughts on this, because obviously, like you said, the prequels were really kind of Star Wars. So I'm curious to hear a lot of your thoughts, and we'll get into that. So obviously, we'll get started with A New Hope. And Rob, I'll let you go first and talk about A New Hope, because obviously this is where we started. So let's take it away.
Man, just the whole thing, it's you think about all the things that we get introduced to. If you start with this movie, and I believe that's the correct way to start. Like if you're gonna introduce Star Wars to somebody who's never seen it, when you're when my kids first started watching Star Wars, they watched it in the order that they were released, not episodic order, but we started at 4, went to 5, went to 6, and then started over at the beginning. And there's so many just absolutely classic things that we come to know and love about Star Wars that start with this. We get introduced to Han, we get introduced to R2-D2 and C-3PO, and just kind of their the way that humor is used in the original trilogy is just so much better than what we get in, and I think, the sequel or prequel trilogy. The characters are so much more interesting. We get the great love story between Han and Leia. We see the beginning of it, but we really, we get introduced to Han. We get introduced to Chewbacca, who really begins kind of these quirky alien characters that we don't ever understand, but they certainly have a personality that shines through, even though we don't ever actually have a clue what it is they're truly saying. And by the way, Han shot first. I will accept no other alternatives. That's permanent. Like you will never convince me otherwise. Han shot first. But just even something, when you think about the cantina scene, you can hear the music in your head right now, wherever you are. If you're in the car on the way to work, if you're walking to class, if you're on the subway, or if you're mowing the lawn, doing dishes. And when I say to you the Mos Eisley cantina scene, you immediately start thinking about oboe music. Like immediately, it's in your head right now, and it'll probably be stuck in your head for a little bit. You're welcome. There's just so much to love here. We get introduced to Darth Vader. We get introduced to the dark side, and it's mysterious, and all of the things about it. This film begins, a lifelong love affair with Star Wars for so many of us that grew up where this was the only Star Wars we had.
Yeah, Rob, those are some absolutely great points. Harrison, I'm going to start with you next here, and your thoughts on, because you have it from a very, very young age, seeing these movies. So I'm interested to hear what you think here.
It's really interesting thinking about the original trilogy because, like I said earlier, it was in a stupid DVD box set, and I didn't like it. It looked old. It wasn't as exciting, right? Who are these old people? Why does the lightsaber not look as cool? So on and so forth. Why I didn't have a Luke Skywalker toy. I had an Obi-Wan Kenobi toy. So it wasn't as exciting as when I was younger, but I still liked it. Like, it's still Star Wars. Who's going to complain? Like, it's great. Now that I'm older, I can clearly understand that it is superior. Don't get me wrong. I love the prequels. I'll watch them all day long. Actually, not really. Definitely not Attack of the Clones. I'll watch them. Let me refresh. I will watch them, and for the most part, enjoy it. But I can understand that the original trilogy is significantly better than the prequels. Granted, Revenge of the Sith is still like #1 Star Wars for me, but that's a lot of it is like what the experience of what it is. The original trilogy, I recently, this past September, went and had an opportunity to see like a theater viewing for the 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back. That was like one of the best experiences ever. I went with my brother, my dad, and my sister. It was so much fun. Star Wars is great. The characters are great. It's hilarious. Han Solo is amazing. Luke Skywalker is amazing. I love the original trilogy, and who doesn't? Technically, it's amazing for its time. The story is great. These characters are phenomenal. It's been fun now that I'm older and I can understand what it is to understand. Hey, this is why people thought this was cool. Like, when this isn't a stupid DVD in a box set that you can't get it out, when you're not a child, like, this is really great stuff. And so it's interesting to have, like, where I never thought it was like blatantly bad. It was just like, this isn't as fun for kid version of me, to be like, wow, this is really genuinely like great filmmaking and just genuinely great Star Wars. So I really, really love the original trilogy. Granted, my emotion about it isn't as passionate as the original or as the prequel trilogy, but I do love the original trilogy. I think they're easier to watch. They're easier to enjoy because they are just high quality made. Where the prequel trilogy, I have to kind of pump up that nostalgia in myself first. So yeah, I really, really love the original trilogy, especially now that I'm older. It's great, and I'll say I used to have a problem. So obviously, my name is Harrison. In case you didn't know, everyone thinks that I'm named after Harrison Ford. I'm not. I'm named after like my great grandpa. But it always bothered me. Like, I'm not Harrison Ford. I'm not named after him. Like, it really bothered me, especially in middle school. I was like, that is not me. I'm Harrison, not Harrison Ford. And then I walked out of that 40th anniversary viewing back in September, and I was like, I don't care. Everybody can assume I'm named after Harrison Ford. He's great. Like I don't know what it was about that experience that really like switched it over for me. But yeah, I love the original trilogy. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, when I first saw the original Star Wars, I was 6 years old. So, again, for me, that's a lifetime ago. But seeing Darth Vader back then, it was like, oh my God, like, that was iconic. He was so scary. Like, why does this guy breathe like that? Like, everything about it was just fantastic. And then I get older and continue to rewatch them and start to like understand and really start to dissect movies and things about them. And Rob, we talked about this, and I have said this before, but the one thing that is missing a lot of the time now, with actors and actresses, is what, in even to this day, watching these movies, what leaps off at the screen is the commanding presence. And he's a main character, but I'm going to exclude Vader, that Luke, Leia, and Han have. Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford. They have screen presence in a way that is lacking in some of today's stars. They absolutely own everything. You don't have to question who's a star. You don't have to question who's on screen. These guys and Carrie Fisher, boy, did they own everything that is happening. And I still am like in awe of their screen presence watching it to this day. It makes it sadder because of the passing of Carrie Fisher, seeing her. But man, did they command everything that they're in.
I could agree more. And what's really amazing, so a couple things. Thinking about iconic trios, certainly when you compare these three to, I guess what you would call the trio we get in the sequel trilogy, like it's not even close. Like Rey, Finn, and Poe compared to Luke, Leia, and Han, like it's not even close. And if you want to go to the prequel trilogy, with Obi-Wan and Anakin and Padme, I mean, first of all, Anakin switches actors from 1 to 2. It's not even close. And you can't even really think of a 3-pack of characters that hold up. I mean, even if you go to like comics and go to Bruce, Clark, and Diana, like it's still not as good and captivating as what these three do. And one of the things that's always mystified me about Star Wars is coming out of this. Harrison Ford had a phenomenal career, has been in lots of movies, has had lots of iconic roles. Carrie Fisher really kind of didn't. She did a lot of things behind the scenes that people don't really know about. She was actually kind of a go-to person in Hollywood for screenwriting punch-ups. If you had a script that was really not working, she was kind of a resource to get it punched up and actually make sense and have it work. She's not credited for a lot of what she's done, but that was kind of the niche she filled. And Mark Hamill really didn't do a whole lot. Obviously, he's been the Joker and we can probably have a conversation about ranking Jokers, and Mark Hamill's got to be up there, even though he never appeared physically as him. His voice as the Joker is incredible. But outside of that, I was always amazed that so few people other than Harrison Ford coming out of Star Wars went on to have mega careers that something like this should have kind of launched for them.
Yeah, I love the fact that like Harrison Ford, like he could like care less about Star Wars if you ever like listen to any of his interviews. Like he just doesn't care. He we can talk about it more in Empire Strikes Back, but he's frozen in carbonite because it was widely thought he wasn't going to come back for the third one. He was very adamant that he wanted his character killed off, and they wouldn't do it. So I'm not coming back, and he's frozen in carbonite in the second movie. It's to me, it's just really funny how much he seems to not care about Han Solo. Obviously, he cares about the people that he worked with. He gave some really great interviews when Carrie Fisher passed about how he felt about her and how he felt about Mark Hamill and things like that. But he certainly doesn't hold that Han Solo character close to him. Like, if you ever listen to Mark Hamill talk about Luke, and it's widely known some of the things that he felt about The Last Jedi and how Luke's character was portrayed, like he identifies with Luke Skywalker in a way that Harrison Ford just like does not care. So I've always found that like pretty funny, how like nonchalant he is about that. But Yeah, this first movie just, to me, it's so good. It's a little funny watching it compared to some of the other stuff, especially Rogue One, how slow the lightsaber battle is between Obi-Wan and Vader. And there's certainly thoughts on that, but you know, Harrison, I'll go to you first. As you have gotten older and watched this more, um, what are your thoughts on some of the things that happen in this movie, and as it relates to the prequels? Like, did you start to get a better appreciation of like the story behind this, or how did growing up and watching the prequels really, not first, but I think you know what I mean, relate to you seeing these movies?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like I mentioned, Obi-Wan Kenobi was my favorite Star Wars character of all time. So you start A New Hope, and like Obi-Wan Kenobi's like some weird old dude. Like that's annoying to a young version of me. So that, yeah, that definitely didn't help. But being older now, I watch them like, man, this is great. Like this is definitely how I see the characters would go. Like after the tragedy of Revenge of the Sith, yeah, this is definitely feels real. It makes the characters feel real. And I think it's great. I think the way that the story carries over, I think is awesome. I got to mention, to go back to what you said, there is a screen presence that those three have that I didn't have a word for until you said it, and it is screen presence. I don't know how I didn't think of that, but there's just something about them that's just like that makes these characters so iconic. And say what you will about Harrison Ford's performances in all other forms of Star Wars, but I was watching The Force Awakens, and when him and Finn and Chewie, I don't remember what they're doing. They're doing something in The Force Awakens. They're the three of them together. They're breaking into to blow up the thing. And Finn is like, "Oh, we'll just use the Force," and Han looks, and he's like, "That's not how the Force works." Like that scene works because of Han Solo in the original trilogy, and Harrison Ford is especially because of how much he like doesn't care about Star Wars, makes it even better that he has such a great screen presence. But yeah, the original trilogy, specifically New Hope, it was always, when I was younger, like, oh my gosh, like when I would watch him, like, oh, here we go with this old Obi-Wan guy, and the lightsaber comes out really slow, and like they're gonna like whack sticks together like 3 times, and then the lightsabers fight's over. Like, how boring. And now that I'm old, I'm like, wow, this is so well written. I love these characters. Everything is so much more emotional. Duel of the Fates, we all talked about how that scene is great. But up until the point where Qui-Gon dies, it's not a super emotional lightsaber fight. It's just like cool factor dialed up all the way to 100. But the lightsaber fights here are very emotional. They're very seem heavier almost, and it's great. It's almost like a maturer take of all the cool things that the young version of me liked about the original or the prequel trilogy. It's like, okay, now we're just going to add maturity to it for the original trilogy.
Yeah, and one thing that I will say that I like, and it's just like little things that seem like so trivial. When Obi-Wan is talking to Luke and he's like, I have something for you. And he gives him, the lightsabers, like, it's your father's lightsaber. And then I like went back and thought about like, yeah, he picked that up. Like he picked that up after he delimbed Anakin. Like, but then he kept it that whole time. And, did he keep it because, he wanted to give it to Luke? Did he maybe keep it just because of it was, reminding him of Anakin the way he used to be? And then now having context when he sits there and says, Anakin was a good friend, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, it actually like hurts to hear him say that, where before it was just like, oh, that stinks. Like one of his Jedi friends was killed or whatever it is you thought when you first saw Star Wars. But as bad as some of the prequel trilogy is, I just think about those things and some of the things he says in A New Hope about Anakin, and I'm just like, oh, darn it. Like it is sad.
I think it's going to be a great opportunity to explore some things with the Obi-Wan series that's coming up. Even though I don't really like having to go to other media to explain and fill in holes, I think there's some really compelling things that we could see Obi-Wan doing in his time in seclusion, because there's certainly a big gap between when he kind of says his goodbyes to Master Yoda and Organa and kind of moves off to Tatooine. What's he do that whole time? It's interesting because, and I'd kind of forgotten about this until I recently rewatched it, but Yoda even says to him, that he's got more to learn from Qui-Gon, who's going to be speaking to him, as a Force ghost. I kind of hope we see some Liam Neeson in the Obi-Wan series. It'll be very disappointing if we don't, because what exactly is he doing this whole time? What is he doing to prepare for the events of this film, which he must know at some point he will have to come face to face with Darth Vader again. It's not like he isn't hearing the news of the galaxy. To think that it's never going to happen wouldn't be realistic. So I'm very interested to see how the Obi-Wan series treats that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the line in, the last time I felt this presence was, with my former master, and he mentions when we last saw each other. As I got older, I always and after watching the prequel trilogy, I always felt that he didn't mean the last time that he saw him as Anakin Skywalker. I mean, yeah, he was called Darth Vader, but Obi-Wan didn't see him in the suit. I always felt that he meant since the last time they saw each other like this. So that'll be really interesting to see, because they've already confirmed that they have a battle. That's super interesting to me. But Harrison, go ahead and piggyback off any of that. I feel like I've been talking for a long time.
No, I was just going to say, all I have to say with that is that if it's treated the same way that the battle between Ahsoka and Darth Vader is, I'm going to have no complaints. So, Rob, that's another reason that you need to watch Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah.
All right. I'm getting to it.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Also, before I forget, and before we move on too far from the prequels, also finally, that way before the Clone Wars happened, there was a 2D animated micro series. It's like 2 seasons long. It's finally on Disney Plus. It's so good. Anyone who hasn't seen that, check it out. It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things too that I really just like about this original trilogy is, again, how well it holds up, because one of the things that's, again, kind of off-putting for me about the prequels is the CGI. And a lot of, to me, the original trilogy looks better than the prequels, even though it came out well before. And I'm not talking about the special editions. I'm talking about Star Wars. I really don't like to talk about the special editions because I think it, taints the original trilogy. So I just
hold on, wait, Matt. I want to get this clear. You don't like it when directors go back and adjust work that they had worked on before?
I think I'm going to ignore that question. I know where you're going with this, but yeah, it depends on why. So, but one of the other things too with this, and you kind of go back and I wonder if George Lucas made some of the decisions, because in the beginning, Luke is a little bit like whiny. Oh, I wanted to go look for power converters, and oh, it's just one more season. there are some like mirror images of the way he acts in the beginning, and then the way Anakin acts, but thank God he doesn't act like that for 3 movies, because I wouldn't have been able to handle it. But I do think there's actually some pretty good symmetry, so to speak, between some of Luke's actions and how Anakin acted in the prequel trilogy. I'll let Rob. I'll let you go first on that.
Oh, sure. I couldn't agree more that thank God he sort of got over that very quickly, because I don't know that we could have taken a whole lot more. He seems like a simple farm boy. He doesn't seem remarkable in any way, and to think that he's going to become the savior of the galaxy from very simple beginnings. He doesn't even really particularly believe in himself. It doesn't see himself in that way, and to get caught up in, he gets attacked by the Raiders, and then is saved by Ben Kenobi, who he then finds out is actually Obi-Wan, which, again, going back to kind of things that don't make sense, like, okay, so if you're trying to hide from Darth Vader, you change your first name from Obi-Wan to Ben, and then just leave the Kenobi at the end, like, he don't think that would have tripped any signals. I digress. It's very interesting to see, where this journey begins for him. Even just something as simple as when he goes to the cantina and the guy bumps into him and, he doesn't like you. Oh, sorry. I don't like you. He's very scared in this moment. It's so amazing to watch that journey. We kind of talked about before, on some of the Mandalorian episodes, how much Star Wars is inspired by, the hero's journey and that book, and how much of that is directly influenced on Lucas. And you certainly see that a lot with Luke, and we see the beginning of that in this first film.
Yeah. Harrison, any thoughts on some of the parallels that I didn't pick up on really like immediately, but over time I feel like there's some actual parallels between their 2 characters?
Yeah, I actually think that is extremely intentional. The way that Luke starts out as like a whiny teenager, the exact same way that Anakin was. It makes sense. It's also how both Anakin and Luke were living on a desert planet. It's the same one, but a desert planet where they were just doing work as a child, like expected, and then some outside force acted upon them. The force found a way, so to speak. They get roped into this huge adventure. The next thing they know, they're blowing up starships. So I don't know. I think it's great. Like father, like son, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think, again, I didn't really kind of like appreciate how much their like life kind of paralleled for some reason. When I first started watching Star Wars, and even in some of the rewatches. But over time I was like, oh, this is actually like very interesting how their lives were very much paralleled, and how a couple of choices made one person go one way and another person go another way. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I certainly think it's interesting, and I think it got explored a little bit more, especially in Return of the Jedi, which we'll talk about coming up here. But with A New Hope, one thing that I will say that I'm not particularly a fan of is, and it gets explained in Rogue One, but it still feels like very much just like, what the heck? You get oh, hey, we have this plan to destroy the Death Star. And for the most part, it just kind of goes off for me, like way too easily. I don't know. I've always kind of had a problem with like towards the ending of this movie where it felt, I don't want to say abrupt, but it definitely just seemed a little bit too easy for me for them to actually take this plan into motion. Harrison, I'll let you go. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Rogue One definitely changes the conversation on this, which I'm excited we're going to have a chance to talk about. But in this original trilogy and A New Hope, it does feel you see Lucas's shortcomings. It's almost just like a Deus Ex Machina. Like, well, we got to have him save the world. How about we just let him blow it up? Like, okay, that sounds good. Put that in the script. You know, like it is not. Well, let me say this. They did the same thing with The Force Awakens, like just blatant ripoff. And there's something about The Force Awakens that feels a little bit more earned, even though they're doing the exact same thing. And I don't know why. The trench run, great scene. And of course, Rogue One adds a lot more detail in it, but A New Hope on its own, it almost feels a little bit too easy. Like, just like, well, you know, they're the heroes, so they have to win. But granted, that's a very, very minor complaint. At least for me. It doesn't affect it too much. It's just kind of, because it's also like, oh, that's Star Wars, that's just what happens. Like, it doesn't happen differently. But, you know, looking at it objectively, it is a little bit...
Rob, any thoughts on that?
You know, it's hard to think of a better way to phrase it than what Harrison put up. It's literally the phrase I was thinking was Deus Ex Machina. You know, it's just kind of convenient. Like, all right, we're getting to the end of the movie. We got to get this thing finished up. So, hey, look, there's the port, and boom, Death Star, bye-bye. You know, like, at the time, it's kind of like, wait, they just engineered that into it. Like, there was no checks, no balances. There was no, like, you know, planning department that has to sign off on all of these. It looks for it. There's, you know, I've mentioned before during Mandalorian recaps that there's clearly no Empire OSHA that's like looking at this stuff for safety. Like, at no point did it occur to anybody like they need to verify, because people make mistakes. Like, even a great architect can make a mistake. And, oh, hey, buddy, hey, you might want to look at this. You see this exhaust port? It looks like a Rebel torpedo could fit like right in there, almost perfectly fit right in there. And if it were to do that, catastrophic explosion, we all die. We should probably address that. Like, at the time, it really seemed very strange. In general, though, I think this is one of those things that if this were a bad movie, that kind of thing would bother me. The movie is fun. The series is fun. We eventually get Rogue One that kind of explains it a little bit. But even still, like, we tend to excuse these kinds of things in movies we like.
I will say that
100%. Like you said, I mean, if the rest of the movie wasn't just so awesome, I think there'd be a lot more that you would kind of nitpick at. But there's just too much good about this movie to really think anything else. So with that being said, with A New Hope, Harrison, what is your favorite scene from this movie?
Oh, it's been so long since I watched A New Hope, so let me. I'll have the other two go first, so I'll try and remember.
All right. Rob,
you know, there's a lot of good things here. How do you choose? You know, how do you choose between the cantina scene? How do you choose? So, you know, every scene with Han Solo and Leia together is gold. Like, find me a scene with the two of them on screen that isn't perfect. You know, like a little short for a stormtrooper. Like, how is any of that not great? Like, how do you choose from that? So I think maybe the escape when they rescue Leia.
Okay. So mine is hands down the Darth Vader scene. And I find your lack of faith disturbing, because when I first saw it, it absolutely cemented, like, this is the guy you do not mess with. Like, holy crap. And like, just how casually, because before that, the guy is, if you didn't know anything about Star Wars, you know, this guy is like berating him and just, you know, don't try and threaten me or scare me with your sorcerer's ways. Like, that stupid religion hasn't brought you anything. And out of nowhere, he's just like, oh, I guess I'll just kill you, like without physically harming him, and just the fear in that guy's eyes and how he casually is just like, as you wish. Back then, not knowing anything about Star Wars, and then really seeing like, whoa, like that for me was, because of what it meant at the time. That's my favorite scene.
So I guess that just leaves
Harrison.
me.
That's I don't know. Is that enough time?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the escape scene. It's particularly the scene where Hannah's like, yeah, we're fine, How are you? And then he just like shoots. He's like, boring conversation anyway. That scene's great. That's probably my favorite there.
Right. I think they're coming. Like,
yeah, boring conversation anyway.
That is pretty good. All right, so that would take us to what I think is almost considered general consensus, maybe one of the best Star Wars movies, and The Empire Strikes Back. And I love this movie. It's not quite my number one, but it is very close up there. But boy, The Empire Strikes Back, you get more of Vader, you get the amazing Cloud City, which looked great. You see the Emperor. There's a lot going on here. I mean, that opening battle scene is fantastic. Way back when this movie first came out, the reveal that like blew everybody's minds. This movie has a lot. So, Rob, I'll let you start first here with The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, man, it starts right off, and you get that the ice planet scene, and you get Luke and he's stuck in the ceiling, and he's got to take out the Wampa, and Han goes to rescue him, and then follow that up with the I don't call them AT-AT. I think that's technically what they're supposed to be called. My entire life, I believed it to be an AT-AT because it's an AT-ST is the other thing. So like, why would we don't call it AT-ST? So I don't call them AT-ATs. But anyways, just the great battle that opens up with the speeders and the ingenuity to use the tow hook. And that's become just an incredibly iconic scene. That bit is referenced. Every Star Wars video game ever has to include that in it. So you have the chance to do it because it's just so cool. I've probably played that exact scene in like 4 or 5 Star Wars games at least. We get the introduction to Yoda and just how cool that whole bit is. And I much prefer Yoda as a Muppet as opposed to CG. I just think he looks better. I think he's more believable. Matt, one of the things you referenced was just how much better the effects hold up from the original trilogy compared to the prequel. And I think that's because they did most things with puppets and practical effects. And because you have a real physical object on screen with the lighting that everybody else is going off of, it always is going to look more real. I've certainly said it on our Mandalorian recaps. I think one of the smartest things they did is make Baby Yoda a Muppet more often than CG. It just, when you're trying to get this adorable character to get everybody to fall in love with it, when you have something real and physical, it's always going to work better. And that's part of the reason I think that so many of the effects work better and hold up better from the original trilogy than the prequels. We get our introduction to Boba Fett. I know technically we get our introduction to Boba Fett in the Star Wars Holiday Special, which, Matt, you didn't have that on our agenda, the Holiday Special.
Thankfully so.
I figured
you didn't want us to cover that? That's not in your power rankings?
I figured that's a full episode onto its own. Just there's so much greatness to talk about in that special. One of the greatest cinema masterpieces of all time.
It's right up there with Citizen Kane and Godfather 2.
Yeah, I mean, they would be lucky to be held in the same breath as that. So maybe another time, if I ever want to talk about something really good, we'll bring that up. But for now, we'll just continue with junk. So Harrison, Where do you stand on Empire Strikes Back?
How can you not love it? I always liked Empire Strikes Back. I particularly loved Hoth. I'm talking about like growing up. Like I said, I wasn't the biggest fan of the original trilogy growing up. Not that I ever disliked it, but of the original trilogy, I always kind of liked Empire Strikes Back the best without ever understanding it. It was just kind of, I thought Han Solo's hood was cool on his jacket. I liked Hoth. I thought the AT-ATs, because that's what I'm going to call them, were cool, so on and so forth. But then, like I said, this last September, I had the chance to go see it in theaters with my dad and my brother and my sister for the 40th anniversary, and it was like it made all of it good that much better. It was the jokes were funnier, the action was better, the characters were better, the story was that more engrossing, the emotions were stronger, and I came away thinking like, wow, this really is like the best Star Wars movie. I mean, I think it's fascinating on Letterboxd. This film has a 4.4 average rating out of 5. Like, Letterboxd is tough on movies. To get a 4.4 is ridiculous. Because I think we all just admit that the Empire Strikes Back is great. The twist is iconic. And it's just awesome. And there's a reason that 40 years later, we still go back to the theater to watch it, because it's so much fun. It's so good. It's so gripping. Han and Leia alone, their relationship in this film is worth watching just for the two of them, because they're so great, and so on and so forth. So of the original trilogy, this one is easily my favorite. This one is very, very high. I haven't quite decided yet for my rankings as far as all of Star Wars goes. Like, this is, when you think about the greatness of Star Wars, you usually think of The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I mean, again, just the three main characters, Han, Leia, Luke, just major screen presence. Han's super funny in this. He's also like, again, in this one, I feel like you can feel the friendship is there, even though we don't know how much time has essentially passed. When he is, before he's going to leave, and he stops Luke for a second, and he's just like, "Hey, you okay, kid?" Or he goes out to get him, and he's just like, the guy tells him like, "Oh, well, your tauntaun will freeze." He's like, "Well, I'll see you in hell, but like, I'm going to get my buddy." Like, I don't know why, but even though we didn't see as much, I just genuinely feel like the chemistry that these actors and actresses had together, like, makes you believe that, Rob, you've said this phrase, like, the universe is lived in. Like, these are actual characters that have experience, and certainly you saw them, but like, they really care for each other. And I thought they brought that through on the screen incredibly well in this movie. Looking back now, it's incredibly funny. So seeing Return of the Jedi, and there's certainly a lot of memes for that, but I cannot anymore look at the scene where Leia kisses Luke and not like just lose my mind with laughter. Because she just so openly admits like, "Oh, I've always known." It was like, well, you knew when you were, playing tonsil hockey with the guy. Like, what the heck was that? But like, that scene, like, I just burst out laughing now.
It's very cringy, right? It's hard to watch.
Yeah, I don't think it would be as hard to watch if, like, in Return of the Jedi, like, the dialogue that was written for, like, "Oh, I've always," like, it just makes it seem so weird that she's just like, "Oh yeah, I've always known about that." And it's like, well, what the hell? Like, you could have written any other dialogue line and been okay. Like, but
it could have even been, "I've known for a while now."
Right. Like, but yeah, just the dialogue is a little awkward on that. So that scene makes me laugh. But, one other character that gets brought into this, and again, screen presence, Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian. Boy, certainly becomes iconic in his own right. I loved him, and I loved the idea of Cloud City, and some of the scenes there, again, just to show how much of a badass Vader is. He, like, Darth Vader, like, think about that, is casually sitting at a dinner table just waiting for them, and he just stops the blaster first of all, and he's just like, hey, like, we'd be honored if you join us for dinner. Like, he's so casual that he's like, you're of no threat to me whatsoever. So sit down. Like, I love it. I love those scenes in Cloud City.
There's, you know what, there's so many iconic lines from particularly this second film. I mean, you think about something like, I've altered the deal, pray I do not alter it any further. Like, I just know that line off the top. I didn't have to look that up. Like, I know that line. And they're sprinkled all through this. Pretty much every single line that Yoda says is a classic and an all-timer, and you can think of all of them in your head. I don't know who exactly it was that came up with Yoda's speech pattern and the way that he talks that way. And it's how much better is Yoda because he talks backwards, like just little things like that. And then you get to the end of the film when Han gets frozen in carbonite and Leia says, I love you after the big kiss. And he says, I know. I mean, is that among the greatest lines in any film ever? Like, quick story. Since we're sharing, anytime like my wife asks me to do something and I text her back, oh, hey, I took care of that thing, and she'll send me back, thanks, honey, I love you. And instead of responding back, I love you too, I immediately send her the gif of Harrison Ford saying, I know. Like, it's instant. Like, I don't even know why she bothers doing that, because it's just what's going to happen. I'm just sending Han Solo every time. Just as soon as she says it, it's Han Solo. Like, that's just a little bit about how things work in my house. There's so many great lines like that throughout here. You're right. This is definitely the best of the original trilogy. Where does it rank overall for me? You got to listen to the second episode to find out.
Yeah, that line, by the way, was totally ad-libbed. He came up with that on the spot, which makes it even better.
Right.
But Harrison, go ahead and, your thoughts on some of these things that we just talked about.
First, I just got to say this is like totally kind of off topic, but the first time anybody mentions Lando, or anytime someone mentions Lando now, I immediately think of the Lego Batman movie. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but in the Lego Batman that movie, Batman steals a hyperdrive from the Millennium Falcon, and Lando and them, they're flying out of the worm thing that's not entirely stable, and Lando's in it, and he's like, "Hit the hyperdrive, Chewie!" And the thing gets up and he's like, I don't know why, but I just had to mention that. It has nothing to do with Star Wars. It's stupid, but it's such a funny scene. So yeah, Lando is an iconic character, and he's so like easy to love and hate at the same time. And I used to always kind of be bothered by the Cloud City scene because it was just like this is like not a super hopeful Star Wars film. Like, Star Wars is generally pretty hopeful. This is definitely like the doom and gloom, so to speak, and it fits really well now. But being younger, I was always like, oh, this isn't very nice. Like, Vader shows up and someone gets frozen in carbonite. Like, that's how exciting. And particularly the Cloud City scenes. But watching them now, it's just so great, and the way that the characters interact with each other, and the way that it all feels natural. And particularly the way that Luke feels strongest to the Force, or that he feels the Force the strongest, however you say that properly, is when it involves his friends, when it involves Leia and Han. That's when the Force has the strongest impact on him, and he's able to use it the strongest. I think that's so great, and that fits perfectly with how we see these characters interact with each other. And I just love to see how all of this is. It's not just a rebellion, kind of like the first one feels. It's these characters trying to find their place in this rebellion that is of incredible importance and trying to find their potential in it. That is really, really great, and I had no idea that Star Wars had that depth to it, but it really does here. Even with some great characters and those lines, like this is why Star Wars is famous for the lines, because of, again, Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, I mean, again, the thing too about this trilogy is, and again, I'll credit Lucas on this. As much as the prequel trilogy, like sometimes flip flopped, minus the one flip flop of like I said, that scene that I mentioned with Leia, the characters all in these movies have a very, very natural, believable like progression to me. It all makes sense. It all fits together. Um, you would understand why there might be some struggle, why there might be some, well, what side am I on? But it all works. Like everybody seems to be where they should be in terms of character development. It never really wavers. Even when there's reasons why maybe it should. So I really appreciate the character development in this series as a whole, particularly in this movie. Um, Again, you get towards the end. I mean, when Luke shows up and that first scene where Vader is standing at the top of the stairs and just the lightsaber comes out, again, it's the lighting. It's like that lightsaber battle is awesome. You start to see the aggressiveness of Vader. You start to see the desperation of Luke. Everything about it works. And then you get just the iconic, you know, line of like, I'm your father, which again, back then, like shocked everybody. But side note, again, I got to plug the Darth Vader comic series. If you haven't read it, read it, because in between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, they fill in the gaps of like Vader going like absolutely nuts trying to find this Luke kid, who he starts to suspect, like, is his son. You get backstory into before Empire Strikes Back of him hunting down this person that blew up the Death Star. Really good. So again, if you're looking for something to read Star Wars wise, I highly recommend that Darth Vader series. But, Harrison, it certainly didn't have probably, I don't know, like maybe it didn't. So I'll let you go last on it. But Rob, talk about like the impact back then to find out that Vader was Luke's father.
It was definitely a big twist. And it's one of those ones that, you kind of feel bad for anybody that has never seen Star Wars to try to sit down and watch it with them, because there's absolutely no way they don't already know that twist. Even if you've not watched the films, like this is something that it's unavoidable. It's an accepted part of pop culture that, Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father, that Anakin Skywalker becomes Darth Vader. Like it's so ingrained into pop culture that it is, it's part of the reason I wanted to show the Star Wars films to my kids as early as they watched it, because I didn't want that twist to somehow be ruined for them. Like I would have felt like a bad parent if they already knew that. And talking about iconic lines, no, I am your father, even though everybody gets it backwards and says, Luke, I am your father. I think that's partly because of Tommy Boy. But what an impact. And the fact that there's so much, I guess I want to say it's commonly accepted now that was something that was done afterwards, or was at least not told to the cast, and only a select few of the cast actually knew that it was not the case. I believe at one point, I think Obi-Wan was maybe supposed to have been Luke's actual father. There's a lot of story around that exact moment of the film.
Yeah, Harrison, maybe not the same impact, but just thoughts on that scene, the lightsaber battle, like the emotion that goes into it. What were your thoughts on that scene?
Oh, I think it's a great scene. I think that lightsaber battle is great. Seeing just the desperation of Luke, and we see it even. Well, first I have to correct myself. Earlier, when I was talking about the lines, I said we get the great lines because of Return of the Jedi. I meant The Empire Strikes Back, but I just had to correct that for myself. But we see it more in Return of the Jedi, the way that Luke kind of crosses into the dark side, so to speak, but stays in the light. in this desperation and this anger, to then have that turned around and have someone reveal that, this person that you're almost lashing out against, fighting for what feels good, and all this emotional confliction of growing up and trying to reach your potential in a rebellion for the fate of the galaxy. This guy's your father. Like, holy smokes, what a twist. What great writing. It never felt like a twist to me because I didn't know that was a twist. Like, I didn't know that was an iconic twist that shocked people until I was much older, because that was always just, oh yeah, like Darth Vader's Luke's father. Like, they parodied it in Star Wars, or in Toy Story 2, I think. Like Toy Story 2 was more of a twist to me when Zurg says to Buzz Lightyear's like, no, I'm your father. That was more of a twist to me than Star Wars was, because, like, I don't know, it's just, that's what Star Wars is. Darth Vader's Luke's father, it's just the way it is. But twist or no twist, it's still a great moment for Luke to have that entire moment leading to, no, I'm your father. Search your feelings, true. Like that. Such a great moment.
Yeah, I mean, even after that, when Luke is, back on the Millennium Falcon and Vader like reaches out to him and he just like he wants him to come with him, and he even tells him there, like, you can destroy the Emperor. Like, man, like, again, you feel like emotion from a guy who's in a suit. At least I did, and that's really hard to capture because there's no facial expressions. Really, there's kind of no body language because everything is covered. But you really felt like this guy wanted his son to just, like, he wanted him to be with him. And regardless of whether or not he's a bad guy is kind of irrelevant in that moment. But I thought that was another really great job that over the years I was like, wow, there's a lot of emotion there when he's just trying to reach out to Luke and be like, well, let's be a family.
Very similar to what we saw from Anakin, trying to convince Padme to rule the galaxy with him, at the end of Revenge of the Sith. It's whether or not he actually believes that they would try to rule it benevolently or just kind of keep on with their fascist sort of way of doing the Empire. It's never really explained. But it certainly keeps I don't actually understand why any Sith ever trains an apprentice, because they've all turned. Like, almost every single apprentice ever has turned on his master. So, like, is that just kind of one of those things, like, it's the circle of life? Like, I train an apprentice, the apprentice kills me and betrays me. He trains an apprentice, that apprentice betrays and kills him. Like, it just kind of seems like that's the way it is. It's very interesting that there's a lot of certainly in the films, but also outside the films. Certainly the game Force Unleashed spends a lot of time talking about Darth Vader's secret apprentice to try to overthrow the Emperor. I think it'd certainly be interesting, depending on how much they expand on it in another series or films, to show him considering that. Does he truly trust the Emperor? Obviously, he's got, based on the expanded fiction Matt's been talking about, he's got his doubts about the Emperor's truthfulness with him. I think that's a very compelling aspect that we haven't seen explored on film.
Yeah, he, in this expanded universe, it is very, very clear he does not trust the Emperor. He even has made, in the current run, he's made a trip to Exegol, and actually sees firsthand, like, what's going on. So he did not really have a lot of trust for the Emperor, but there's a lot of cool ways as to why he's still under his command, so to speak, up until Return of the Jedi there. So, Harrison, any further thoughts on that?
I will say it's interesting to see just the whole dynamic of the Sith, the rule of two or whatever you want to call it. It's just really interesting to see, like, how deeper every single one of these characters feels beyond just, we've kind of said that, it's kind of annoying how with Star Wars you have to explore the expanded lore to get the entire story, which is annoying, but at the same time is really neat because there's a reason that expanded lore is there. There's a reason that there was a market for it, is because these characters felt so like there was so much more beyond what was in screen, and we wanted to see that. And I think that it's tons of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just like we've done with the other ones, Harrison, I'll let you go first. What would you say is your favorite scene from Empire Strikes Back? I think there's some more to pick from in this one, but what would be your favorite one?
Oh man, that's really hard to choose. If I had to just pick one that like is my favorite, without going for the obvious like Luke versus Darth Vader fight scene, I'm gonna go with just the entire of the Hoth battle, particularly Han. On Hoth, the way that he's talking to like the deck officer, where he's like, "Well, did Luke come in the other entrance?" And the guy's like, "I don't know, I haven't seen." He's like, "Well, why don't you go find out?"
Yeah.
And everything on Hoth reminds me of why I love Star Wars over and over and over again. So that'd be.
There you go. Rob, what about you?
So again, I think the obvious scene to talk about would be, the confrontation between Luke and Darth Vader, where he finds out, who his father really is. I think that's kind of the obvious one. If you're going to go away from that, I think the entire scene where Han gets frozen in carbonite. I've already professed my personal love for that, for specific reasons, but just even the lighting in that scene, I can think about just that orangish red, light that's coming down on them. I can just picture it in my mind so vividly. It's such an interesting scene because we don't know what's going to happen next. We're just finally seeing these two characters admitting their true feelings for one another, and not being afraid to admit it, excuse me, to themselves. It's great.
Yeah, some really great choices. There's a lot going on, but I think going back now and like knowing him having to make a choice and like Anakin falling from his choice and Luke actually becoming a Jedi because of the choice, I really like the scene with him and Yoda where he decides that he has to leave and he's just like Han and Leia will die if I don't go, and Yoda's like, well, if they must, I like it because it shows Luke. I like it now because it shows Luke's character. It shows that he was willing to go face the Emperor, but he believed in himself that he wasn't going to fall because he was doing this for the right reasons. Like, he's going to save somebody, but for a different reason than what Anakin was going to save someone for. So I really like that scene between him and Yoda, just because of thinking about what it means personally after watching Star Wars as a whole. So that would be my favorite scene from this. And with that, that's going to bring us to Return of the Jedi, which I actually have some interesting thoughts on that because this is a movie over time for me that has actually gone down, instead of where I originally thought Return of the Jedi was. Certainly there's some good stuff here, but I think on watchbacks, I think this is definitely the weakest of this trilogy. And I would say for me, this third movie of a trilogy, I would actually say that I like Revenge of the Sith more than Return of the Jedi in terms of the third movie in a trilogy. So I'll start with that, and I'll switch it over to Harrison about what are your initial thoughts when you saw Return of the Jedi?
I always liked Return of the Jedi as a kid because I thought the Ewoks were awesome, and I really loved Endor. And I thought the speeders were cool. I thought their Camelot Lodge outfits were cool. But again, as I get older, like this is definitely like The Empire Strikes Back took Star Wars to a very serious note, and this is a return to like the more loony, goofier, sillier side of Star Wars, while also trying to be serious. Like seriously, how do you follow up Empire Strikes Back? That is difficult. I don't care who you are. That's hard. And so Return of the Jedi, I definitely enjoy. Granted, it's been a long, long time since I've seen it. I love the things with like a Jabba. and that's super fun. So I do know I'm holding off on watching it because I'm sure if I rewatch I'm not. There's going to be more, or there's going to be more flaws. But I just kind of am like, you know what? I really liked it. I remember liking this growing up. I always thought it was sweet. It was Jabba's Palace was one of my favorite levels of play on Lego Star Wars: The Original Trilogy. So I kind of like it, but I'm kind of there with you, Rob, where I think this is one that's deteriorated the most with time, where I feel like the others have just aged well, where this not so much. But it is really fun. Like, is it bad? Not at all. Is it anywhere close to Attack of the Clones? Not even close. Like, you can watch this and still have a great time. And the screen presence from the actors and the characters and their friendship is still 100% there. And C-3PO is probably my favorite in this one out of them all. And there's that really emotional scene with R2 that I love. But I think that a revisit would take it down quite a bit.
Rob, where do you stand on Return of the Jedi?
Yeah, I think this is one of those ones that you probably remember it more fondly than maybe what it is if you pop it on again, if you pull up Disney Plus and decide to take another look at it. There's some things that aren't great here, depending on which version of it you watch. If you watch one of the special editions where they add the extra like music video in Jabba's Palace, that's completely unnecessary. Like, nobody needed that. Like, that wasn't what was missing from this movie. It's hard not to hate Boba Fett's death in this. Like, Han just kind of staggers around a little bit and bumps into him, and he kind of forgets how to use his jetpack, and he just like takes off and can't get out of the pit. Like, I don't know. Certainly, we're going to see what happens with the Book of Boba Fett, but it always just felt like a cheap way to kill off a character that we thought was like, whoa, who is this guy? Like, holy cow, he seems totally badass. Like, what is going to be going on with him? So that's kind of terrible. You kind of maybe start to see after the first two films doing as well as they did, where maybe Lucas started maybe going off the reservation a little bit, where we certainly saw him just completely run wild with what he wanted to do with the prequels, and they ended up being largely not good films, with the exception of the third one. Maybe some of those ideas could have been, tapped in a bit, that would have made for a better film here. I just didn't like Yoda's unceremonious death. Luke shows back up, and it's just like, all right, man, yep, deuces, I'm out. Like, I don't know. I wanted something more from Yoda, considering how much we grew to really like that character. In the second film, he was funny, he was clever, he was wise. He was interesting. He's got that really cool way of talking. And in this one, he just, just dies. He just pretty much just dies. There is a lot to like here, but it's probably not as good as you remember it.
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly not. There's some, like you said, there's some changes. This is in 2004 with the special edition. One of those changes is putting in Hayden Christensen as the Force Ghost, which, Lucas stands by that, like why his decision makes sense. I don't agree with it, but again, whatever. But there is still a lot about this movie that actually is really cool. Obviously the Jabba Palace scene before the special edition I thought was really good with the Rancor. Luke, again, it's a little weird just to see how Luke has become really like this all-powerful Jedi, has everything planned out. You don't really see anything else, but it's just like, hey, this guy's got it. But it was cool to see him like that. Even if the execution wasn't completely, nailed. So a lot to like. I do like how he decides he's going to go back and finish the training. But again, Rob, like you said, just Yoda kind of unceremoniously kind of dying off, and then the typical movie trope of him getting out a few last words just before he's going to go. That's been, done to death, no pun intended. But and then you get the scene with Anakin, talking to Obi-Wan about it, which again, some of the one thing too is I don't understand why towards the end Leia just couldn't tell Han that Luke's like, hey, Vader's on this moon. He's my father. You're my sister. I gotta go and I can save him. And she's like, oh, geez, Han, I can't tell you. Like, what about it would make you think that you can't tell Han that? Like, oh my God, you won't believe it. Darth Vader's Luke's like, does she think Han's gonna like storm off and be like, that can't be true. I can't be friends with Luke anymore and I can't be with you. Like, it makes no sense for her not to tell him at all, just to trope up this weird drama.
It definitely makes no sense at all, considering what we just got done, talking about earlier with just how great these three are on camera. That could have been, some really interesting, seeing Han have to make sense of all that, and where do we go forward from here with this new information? Like, how do I help you? How do I help my friends? It just seemed like it was setting up for that final scene where he's like, look, if you want to be with Luke, then I won't stand in your way. Like that's the whole reason that was left that way, was to set up that scene. And that scene's actually not really all that strong anyways.
Yeah. Harrison, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it's trying to have like the same seriousness that Empire did, almost like having a lot of weight and levity to everything, and it's just kind of like, well, this is weird, like not everything is the importance that you give it. When it feels like they're really trying to make it important, when it's like just let the characters be true to themselves and to their friendships, and that's what's going to make it feel memorable.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. One thing that I will say though is, again, the lightsaber battle between Luke and Vader in this is phenomenal, because again, it's not flips and blades spinning around super fast. It's brute force. Like, it's two guys going at it, trying to win this battle. And you really, towards the end, see Luke just almost lose control, where he just starts to pound Vader down and chops off his hand. I love the scene of him looking down and seeing that Vader is like, that hand is the same one that he has, lost. I think that's a great scene, but the lightsaber battles in this, and that just awesome line when he just says, if you won't be turned to the dark side, perhaps she will. And that just pushes Luke over the edge. I love everything about that scene. I do like the Emperor trying to like poke and prod Luke. I just think that's really, really well done. Harrison, as we're talking about the original trilogy now, I really think in terms of lightsaber battles, I think that's, even with the prequels, for me, that's like up there as one of the better lightsaber battles that we get in those 6 movies.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I think that the lightsaber battle with the Emperor, kind of trying to manipulate Luke I think that's one of the best scenes in all of Star Wars, really. Say what you will, with the holes we talked about in the rest of this film, that's a great moment. And how Luke stands up and throws his lightsaber, if I'm remembering my movies right, and he says, I'm a Jedi like my father before me. Like, everything that leads up to that moment is so great, and I really love it, especially as I get older and older and understand that, then the difficulty of trying to walk the line of the light side, if you will. I love that moment.
Yeah. Rob?
Yeah, the lightsaber scene is fantastic. There's a lot to enjoy. That whole scene is fantastic. Luke's unending resolve that he can somehow, through all of this, redeem his father, and he does. and they share just that briefest of moments where it truly is father and son, where it's Luke and Anakin. It's no longer, the Jedi returning against Darth Vader. Is a very touching scene, and it really sets up something that I have problems with future films, based on which we'll talk about tomorrow. Based on his unshaking belief that Vader is redeemable. There is nobody, not one soul in the galaxy besides Luke Skywalker that believes Anakin has any chance at redemption. Not even a spark, not even 1% of half of a person thinks that Darth Vader is redeemable, with the exception of Luke Skywalker. And he is so determined to do it, and he pulls it off. And as a result, could he have just taken out Vader? Yes, there's different points he could have just absolutely taken him out and then tried to turn his attention to Palpatine, where he probably would have failed. He's not as smart. He's not as cunning. He hasn't been doing it as long. The only way for him to win, the only way for the rebellion to win, for him to save the lives of his friends, is through the redemption of Anakin Skywalker. And through and creating that, reaching out to that father-son bond that he tries to create, is the only way to win, and he pulls it off.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, so I cannot wait to talk in part 2 of the Star Wars episode about that, because obviously
What film might I be talking about, Matt? What film might I have a problem with?
I believe that might be The Last Jedi. So, oh God, I am so anticipating all of that will come with that. But, again, in Return to the Last Jedi, I think you put that really well. Just his unrelenting hope that he can and will redeem him, and he's either going to redeem him or he's going to go down, so to speak. There's no other option for Luke when it comes to Vader. And again, there's that really good scene too before he goes to the Emperor, where he surrenders himself, and he just, he tells him, I've accepted the fact that you were once Anakin Skywalker, my father. And Vader says, that name doesn't have any meaning for me. And Luke just responds back with, it's the name of your true self. All of that is just fantastic. It's just fantastic. So yeah, there's a lot to like about this movie, but I think, Harrison, you said it pretty well. It does definitely seem to kind of go back to a little bit of campiness, so to speak, for me. That again, after The Empire Strikes Back, I guess you'd maybe need to have a little bit of levity, so to speak. But some of it, as again, when I was a kid, it was oh, this is so cool in the Ewoks, and then it was well, okay. I guess. But yeah, I mean, I like it. I still think this is a good movie, but it definitely, if you've watched this when you were younger, like Harrison said, and you go back and watch it now, I definitely do not think it holds up as well. And I think most people would go, all right, I mean, it's good, but yeah, it's not what I remember.
It's amazing how nostalgia just clouds your mind, right? I mean, you can do that with a lot of films that you grew up with as a kid. I recently, in the last couple of years, Masters of the Universe made its way onto Netflix, and I'm talking about the cartoon, not the terrible film. And I was oh my God, I was the biggest He-Man fan as a kid. I had every He-Man toy ever. And my son and I were home together by ourselves, and I wanted to show it to him. And I showed him the first episode, and oh my God, it was wretched, terrible. 15 minutes in, he's like, Dad, can we do something else? I'm like, yeah, bud, I think we will. And I'm like, how did I like such drivel? How was it possible that I liked such, it was terrible, objectionably terrible. And it's amazing what nostalgia does to sort of cloud your memories?
I'm just, I'm in shock. I can take anything that you say about The Last Jedi, but how dare you disrespect Dolph Lundgren? Like, oh, the Masters of the Universe movie is a classic.
A classic turd.
It is one of the first movies with an end credit scene. Like it's
So what you're saying is we owe the MCU to Masters of the Universe.
We owe so much to Masters of the Universe. But Harrison, help me out here. Please tell me you've seen this movie.
Sorry.
No. Oh my God. It's Dolph Lundgren running around shirtless with Courtney Cox. How you
Now I need to.
that's the description of the movie. But oh man. Oh, now you know what? Now I'm gonna watch that. I'm gonna watch that again.
You're gonna slide it in between rotations of the Snyder Cut.
Yes. I'll have it playing on. I'll have one playing inside, one playing outside. I'll just go back and forth. But Rob, Return of the Jedi, to me, not as many moments to pick from, but what would be your best scene of this movie?
I think one of the ones that stands out for me, and there's a lot to like. You know, don't get me wrong. When I'm saying that nostalgia kind of clouds your memories a little bit, and this movie may not be quite as good as you remember. Don't get me wrong. I enjoy this movie. Like, if this was on and I walked into the room and people were watching, it'd be like, oh, cool, Return of the Jedi's on. I'm going to watch this, and be, really, really into it and happy. I think for me, I'm going to go with the funeral pyre that Luke makes for Darth Vader. He's come to terms with the fact that he's redeemed his father and is sending him off. I think there's the celebration all around. They've won this battle. They believe they've won the war. There's kind of the weird scene with the Ewoks and the helmets of the stormtroopers. But just Luke having that moment to grieve the father he never really got to know, was powerful to me.
Yeah. Can I just say too that, the helmet scene, I look back at that and go, well, how did they where
did they come from?
Yeah. Where did they come from? And if you really go back to and think about it, how did the Ewoks have any clothes for Leia? Where did they get those from? Kind of disturbing.
They're cannibal teddy bears.
Yeah,
cannibal teddy bears.
Little disturbing if you think about it. But one thing that I love about the scene that you mentioned too, and maybe this is completely unintentional, and maybe it's not, but I do love the fact that it is Luke 100% by himself mourning his father. Even Leia is not with him because she didn't know until right at the end. She wasn't trying to save him. Luke was. So I really do like the fact that it is just Luke there, saying goodbye to this father that he literally just got back for 2.5 minutes. I like that. I think it was the right call. You can't just, granted he threw the Emperor down, the shaft, but that doesn't forgive everything that you did for the galaxy. So I think that was a really well done scene. I will say though that the lightsaber battle between Luke and Vader, while the Emperor is there, is my favorite scene of this movie just because of the raw, pure emotion involved in it. Everything about that part of the movie is done unbelievably. Harrison, where do you stand?
Sorry, my thing glitched there for a while. I agree. I think that ending is great. I think Luke having that funeral by himself is great. And I also, Especially we talked about how Empire takes itself really seriously. It has a lot of levity. Well, this ends like really happily and really hopeful. Like they won. The Ewoks are cheering. C-3PO is telling his stories, and he's lifted up on the chair. Han and Leia are being Han and Leia, and Luke is mourning the death of his father, who he loves dearly. Like, how else could you wrap up Star Wars? It's just a great ending, and I really, really enjoy it. If I have to pick a favorite scene, it's probably going to be the scene, either that end that Rob talked about, or the lightsaber scene that we talked about earlier. Because it's just, it's just a good way to conclude it all, and it's on a bright, uplifting tone, and it as you close out Star Wars, as you bookend it, so to speak, until the sequel trilogy comes. It's a good way to have the lasting memory of Star Wars as something as hopeful as this.
Yeah, I think great points. Again, I in no way, shape, or form, I know I maybe didn't make it seem like it, but in no way, shape, or form do I dislike Return of the Jedi. It is still a fun movie. It is definitely, though, when you go back and watch it compared to, I mean, even A New Hope, so to speak, it's definitely a different tone than those first two movies that we got in this series, but still very good in its own right. At no point is it Attack of the Clones, but at no point for me is it The Phantom Menace. So it's still really enjoyable. I would still watch it. If somebody had it on, I'd even throw it on as a rewatch. Like, I don't think I can really. It's hard to throw on Attack of the Clones and rewatch that and not just do something else. Like, I can't bring myself to actually sit down and watch that like the other movies. The Phantom Menace, I can do it. Obviously, Revenge of the Sith, but Attack of the Clones, like, I cannot find myself sitting down and like really focusing on that movie because there's nothing to focus on. But this will conclude part one of this Star Wars review. Obviously, we talked about the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy. And the next part of this episode is going to be for the Disney acquisition of Star Wars, which includes The Force Awakens, the ever great The Last Jedi, the incredibly polarizing Rise of Skywalker, Solo, and Rogue One, which I'm really excited to talk about all of them. I'm excited to debate the Last Jedi is what it feels like, what that's going to be. That doesn't feel like that's a discussion. That's going to be like, I'm so anticipating hearing all of Rob's new thoughts on The Last Jedi. So
do you know how many times Rob has made a joke about The Last Jedi? And every single time I wanted to be like, Rob, but why? And I finally get to,
and we've never done
it.
We're finally.
Then, not only do I get to hear it, I get to respond and prove him wrong. I will ruin Rob's opinion of The Last Jedi and help him love it. Hopefully. Probably will be unsuccessful, but I'm going to try.
Yeah, so... so for everybody that has, interacted on this Facebook page, I hope that you will find this episode interesting. We are going to post this on the official Facebook page, Matt Goes to the Movies. Part one will be posted. We'll be recording part two, which obviously is going to be a lot of fun for us. And with part two will also come the overall rankings, where we rate Star Wars. That will be posted in a Word document form too on the Facebook page. I would love to see people respond back with their rankings. We've already gotten a couple of them that were really interesting. Certainly, Rob, from what we saw, there was a lot of different takes on where people rank these movies overall.
Like we had talked about before, Revenge of the Sith, I think kind of surprised both of us as to how many people really, really find themselves captivated by that film. And there was a lot of people whose rankings had it number one. The sequel trilogy that we'll get into, I would say it's fair to call it the polarizing trilogy, because I think there is a lot of people universally enjoyed The Force Awakens, and then the next two films are certainly a little bit all over the place with people's thoughts on them. Certainly, I feel like I might have mentioned it once or twice. I have thoughts on The Last Jedi. And then The Rise of Skywalker is maybe the most polarizing film of the whole series. I think the prequel trilogy, everybody's minds are pretty well made up and in agreement. Number one is kind of crap. Number two is a steaming turd pile. Number three is really good. The original trilogy is quite good. Most people like The Force Awakens, and then the final two is really where it gets pretty dicey with people's opinions all over the board.
Yeah, it'll certainly be interesting. But Harrison, as obviously someone who does episodes on your own, I'd like to, even though this is a part two thing, go ahead and plug your show again, because I love it. And hopefully anybody who listens to this show has given yours a shot. But if they haven't, tell us a little bit about your show and what's coming up for you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, especially because there have been things that have been taking my time, so I haven't been able to post an episode or do anything with the podcast for quite a while. And I've just been trying to take the appropriate time needed to keep it enjoyable and what it is. So anyway, that aside, The Basement Binge is the podcast that I host. It's a ton of fun. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. I appreciate Matt giving me the opportunity to talk about it. It's a blast. Obviously, if you can't tell, I really enjoy talking about movies, and so I sit down on a podcast and I talk about movies. As right now, it's just myself. I'd love to get Rob and Matt over on it more, but granted, I still need to record an episode myself. So we're taking baby steps here. If you have not reached out, spread over to The Basement Binge. I'd really appreciate it. A few episodes that I really love, particularly the most recent one, Your Name episode. That was one that I'd spent a ton of time on. A movie that has severely affected me in a positive way. And I spent a lot of extra time to make it an extra episode. I'd appreciate it if you check it out. Thank you again, Matt, for giving me a chance to talk about it. And also thank you a ton for having me be on this episode. I've been looking forward to this episode a ton. And I feel like this is kind of the kick in the pants I needed to help me understand how to get going again in the appropriate way. So thank you, as always. It's a blast being here.
Absolutely. A lot of fun, part two coming up. So again, anybody who interacted or anybody who listens to this show, thank you. If you're a return listener, if you're a first time listener and this is the first episode, hopefully you want to come back for more and see what part two is. And, look at some of the other episodes that we have. They're always a lot of fun. This one's been awesome. And look forward to part two here coming up. So thanks again, folks.